Rent believed that the gift he received from God was not to become a warrior, using a sword and the strength of the body, and not to be a magician who wields destructive spells, and not even to become a healer who can heal wounds and diseases. His gift was something completely different: the ability to use magic taken from others, that is, the ability to borrow magical power and not create it himself. At this time, Misa, full of determination, urged Rent to act without delay and urged him to hurry. Guy, turning to the monsters, confidently suggested launching an attack, expressing readiness for battle and confidence in their strength. He concentrated all his magical energy, gathering it into one whole, and delivered a powerful, explosive blow, demonstrating the strength he possessed. The senior healer, L, could not contain his admiration, and happily declared that Guy had indeed shown himself to be the best of them. The senior mage, Misa, with a smile on her face, noted that this time, judging by the situation, victory would be achieved with amazing ease and without much effort. Rent, watching the action, admired the power of the blow, delivered in one movement, and found it incredibly cool and impressive. Guy, having finished the fight, suggested to his comrades to continue on their way and not to linger, reminding them of the purpose of their journey. In his mind, Rent formulated what exactly his profession was called, and this profession was not ordinary, but rare and significant. The Keeper of Magic, a person capable of managing magical power without creating it himself. The events associated with the beginning of this story took place 5 years ago in a small but significant village for the heroes named Alt. Guy then proudly announced that he had received the profession of a swordsman, which meant that his path would be connected with martial arts and adventuring. The boys around him approved of this achievement and expressed their admiration, noting that he had already become a D-rank adventurer, which was a worthy result. Guy, not hiding his joy, said that he had always dreamed of becoming a real adventurer, and now, finally, he had received exactly what he deserved for his efforts. One of the boys said that his profession was a blacksmith, and his rank was E, which was also considered the beginning of the path. Guy enthusiastically supported him, saying that he would definitely fight with the weapon forged by this boy, and thus give the weapon a real meaning. The boy admitted that deep down he himself also wants to go on an exciting journey full of adventures and dangers. Rent reflected that in this world, as soon as a person turns 15, he receives his unique gift from God, and this moment is accompanied by a special ceremony dedicated to coming of age. He himself also dreamed of one day becoming an adventurer, setting out on a journey and discovering his own path in life. Misa suddenly turned to him, informing him that his name had just been called, and now it was his turn to undergo the ceremony. Rent, walking towards the altar, felt that everything around him seemed so unfamiliar and exciting, as if he had found himself in another world. The man standing at the altar saluted him solemnly, indicating the importance of the moment. Rent, showing respect, addressed him as the Holy Father. The Holy Father gave him a special parchment and told him to say a prayer at the altar by candlelight, explaining that it was at that moment that the Creator would reveal to him the truth of his future path. Misa, who was watching the scene, exclaimed in surprise when she saw that he had already completed the ritual. Guy immediately turned to him with a question about how exactly everything went, clearly worried about the result. Rent said that even the Holy Father himself was surprised by what happened, and apparently his rank was equal to S, which was considered incredibly rare. Everyone present exclaimed in amazement upon hearing about such a rank, as the occurrence of S rank was extremely rare and caused quite a stir. Guy asked curiously to see the parchment and, looking at it, discovered that Ren's profession was a keeper, which was unusual. He was amazed that Ren's magic power reached 1,200 units, which seemed incredible and almost impossible. Misa expressed doubt, since she herself only had 20 units of magic power, which seemed insignificant compared to Rent. One of the girls added that she only had 13 units, emphasizing the contrast. Guy wanted to know what kind of power exactly belonged to Rent, and he expected to see something amazing. Rent, looking at the description of his ability, read that his skill was to transfer magical power to other people, which he interpreted as the ability to borrow energy. Guy began to understand that this meant the ability to take magical power from Rent, and use it in unlimited quantities as long as it was available. Misa happily supported this, stating that it was truly an amazing skill that opened up a lot of possibilities. Rent, hearing her words, became embarrassed and said her name a little confused, not knowing how to react correctly. Misa expressed the opinion that Renta's gift was truly remarkable, especially considering that he possessed the rare S rank. Rent was surprised by her words, as if he had not expected to hear such a high assessment of his gift, but he was touched. Misa, not holding back her good feelings, congratulated Rent on receiving such a significant gift. Rent politely thanked her for her congratulations. He continued to ponder, admitting to himself that in reality, borrowing from a magic keeper was just one of his many skills. At its core, this skill was the ability to store a little more magic power than was normally allowed to ordinary mages. In reality, the term was used as a general term for the energy that was expended in the process of using skills. The expended magical power did not disappear irretrievably, but was restored over time, most often during sleep or proper rest. However, in any case, there was a certain limit, the maximum amount of magical power that could be stored in the body. And this volume could never be restored beyond the established limit. However, Rent had a unique ability that allowed him to store excess magic power in a special internal space he called a, quote, magic storage. The capacity of this storage corresponded to his maximum magic power, which together amounted to an impressive figure of 2,400 units of magic. He continued to think about his abilities, doubting whether he would ever be able to use all these skills, since no one had taught him how to use them properly until now. There was an opinion that at the basis of any magic lies an image, that is, a clear internal representation of the result that the magician strives to achieve. He compared his ability to a child's piggy bank where coins are collected and realized that he could actually store magic like the coins that were put into that little device. Gradually, it became obvious to him that this perception was indeed suitable. Only this was not a piggy bank for small change, but for magical energy, and he decided that he would store magic in this imaginary object. Misa concentrated and released the magic, shouting the name of the spell, Fireball, using the power accumulated in the storage. Rent then said the name of his key skill, Borrowed Magic, activating the transfer of power. Misa, feeling a surge of energy, exclaimed that the powers were indeed returning, which meant the magic transfer had been successful. Rent calmly explained that in order to get the magical power back, one simply needs to place one's hand on the object and direct a flow of power from within oneself into it. Misa followed his instructions, placing her hand and allowing the energy to return, wanting to make sure it would work. Rent confirmed that this was exactly what was supposed to be done, showing that she had done everything correctly. Guy, watching what was happening, said with amazement that it looked like a piggy bank, clearly amazed by the external appearance of the storage facility. Rent nodded, explaining that he felt it was the most appropriate and understandable visual representation of the vault he could imagine. Misa suddenly invited Ren to join them on an adventure, saying that they were planning to register a party with the guild tomorrow. She included herself, Ren, and Guy in the group, adding that they would definitely find more members in time. Rent accepted the invitation with surprise but joy, truly enjoying the prospect of adventure. Guy supported this decision, saying that now they would no longer have problems with magical energy, referring to Rent's ability. Rent calmly reminded that it would not be possible to use all the magic without restrictions, because the power borrowed from him must be returned back. Misa noticed that Rent had always said that he dreamed of living a life full of real adventures, and now he had that opportunity. Rent confirmed this, and then asked if they had already chosen a name for their future squad. Guy proudly announced that they had already decided that their team would be called Sword of the Boundless Sky. He added that over time, this name would become a symbol, because according to their plan, the sword would be able to cut through the sky itself. Misa reacted to this with doubt, suggesting that Guy reconsider the name, perhaps coming up with something more appropriate. Rent, despite Misa's doubts, admitted that he found the name very cool and inspiring. Guy responded by only confidently confirming his opinion, not intending to abandon the idea. Misa sighed and said tiredly, addressing them as hopeless boys, trying to express ironic annoyance. And then Elle came up to them and, introducing herself, said that she was pleased to meet them, adding a new member to the team, a healer. Rent thought to himself that now they really had a healer, and from that moment on their real adventures began. They worked as a single mechanism, swiftly and harmoniously. Rent transferred magical power to his comrades, who used it to fight the monsters, who died one after another thanks to their teamwork. He also realized that the total amount of magical energy they could use depended directly on the total amount of magical power units of all party members. Later at the bar, people started talking about them. Someone said that they had heard of the Boundless Sky Sword. Another confirmed, reminding them that this was the team that went from the initial R rank to C rank in just 2 years. Everyone was amazed at their speed and efficiency, admitting that it was truly an impressive achievement for beginners. Guy stated enthusiastically that now was the best time to purchase new equipment, since their squad had risen in rank and they could afford better quality equipment. Misa cheerfully supported this idea, adding that now it is necessary to move exclusively in the style of so easy, conveying an elevated mood. Elle also expressed her approval, saying that she also really likes and enjoys the prospect. Rent hesitantly reminded them of his presence, anxiously wondering if any of the new equipment was available for him, feeling a little left out. Guy responded that he didn't think Rent needed new gear since he wasn't involved in frontline combat and therefore didn't need upgrades. Elle added with a slight mockery that perhaps he should at least wash his clothes, as they were starting to smell like something sour. Guy responded to her words with a grin, not taking them seriously. Rent mentally compared himself to the others, coming to the conclusion that his level was growing much slower than Guy, Misa, and Elle, and he understood that the reason for this was the peculiarities of his skill. After all, the one who lends magical power must take it back, but in his case, everything was a little more complicated. He collected his thoughts and tried to speak, turning to his comrades, asking if they had forgotten to return the magical energy they had taken from him. Guy turned around in mild surprise but said nothing, and Rent, confused, immediately retreated, saying that it was unimportant and did not insist. Rent was lost in thought again, recognizing that before, when they were equals, they had communicated freely with each other, without tension or restrictions. But now that he was older, he began to look at everything differently, including his past beliefs. In the present, Elle commanded the use of magic enhancement, calling upon combat abilities. Misa cast a fire tornado spell, unleashing a powerful elemental force into the battle. Guy activated his vacuum scythe technique, adding deadly precision to their attack. At this moment, a senior warrior and B-rank adventurer named Guy was looking at the results of the attack with an appraising eye. Elle, being a senior healer also of B rank, commented on what was happening, calling the day a typical victory day. Misa, as a senior mage of the same rank, said that the opponents were indeed weak. Rent, as the Guardian of Magic, with a current magic capacity of 50 out of 1,200 units, watched what was happening with delight, not hiding his surprise. Guy suggested that everyone return home and report to the guild about the completed task. Elle eagerly awaited her assessment and shared it with the others. Misa reported that, according to rumors, their team was the closest of all of rank B to advancing to rank A. Guy responded with a smug grin, clearly proud of their accomplishment. Rent, pointing to something ahead, noted that there was a treasure chest nearby that they could open. All three of them, Guy, Misa, and Elle, reacted simultaneously and with excitement in their voices, expressing interest in the find. Later, when the situation changed, Rent tried to clarify what was going on and spoke words in an attempt to understand something. Guy, with a cold expression on his face, said that he would not repeat himself, and announced that they were going to recruit new adventurers, form a new squad, and Rent would not take part in this new composition. Rent asked with pain in his voice why he was the one who was chosen to be excluded, without understanding what he had done wrong. Guy just chuckled, as if enjoying his confusion, and they showed the bracelets on his hand. Rent, remembering the bracelets from the chest, noticed that they belonged to the very find he had discovered. Guy said that they had appraised the bracelets at a shop, and the shop owner himself was amazed, as the item was extremely rare. Each of the 3 bracelets could restore up to 1,000 units of magic power per day, which exceeded the magic that Rent could give them. Misa added that magical power was indeed needed, but there was no need to rely on Rent for it now. Rent, not giving up, offered to stay at least with the bracelets, because together they could provide more than 5,000 units of magical power, which would make their team truly strong. Elle stated that thanks to the bracelets, they could now use any magic in any quantity, without limiting themselves in any way. Guy, sharply and aggressively grabbing Rent by the throat, said threateningly that now he would give him a test, ordering him to try to get out. He also emphasized that Rent should not try to show off, since his magic was actually not that much. Rent, choking with pain, barely squeezed out words, begging for it to stop, because it really hurt. Elle, watching what was happening, laughed and said that Rent now had such a funny expression on his face that even she found it amusing. Misa, looking down on him, agreed with Guy and said contemptuously that she was not going to pity him, implying that he looked pathetic. Rent, seeing no other way out, silently left them. Elle, seeing him off, laughed loudly and, laughing, said goodbye to him in a mocking tone. Guy said with relief that now their squad had one less problem. Misa added mercilessly that this useless, incompetent man should have been kicked out much earlier. Guy cheerfully picked up on her words, calling Misa cruel, but clearly not condemning her. Rent thought in the rain, admitting that there really was nothing he could do this time. His gift, which had once seemed like a revelation, was reduced to him simply standing behind and distributing magic to others. In a fit of despair, he threw away his piggy bank, a symbol of storage, and with pain in his heart he admitted to himself that he had never dreamed of this. He tried to understand, maybe he was kicked out because he was incompetent. If that was true, then at least the magic he gave away. Rent screamed into the void, demanding that all the magic he had ever given away be returned to him. Suddenly, a voice came into his head, telling him that he had fulfilled all the conditions for the evolution of his gift. Rent was stunned and didn't understand what was happening. The voice continued, stating that his storage had evolved into an infinite storage of magical power, opening up new possibilities for him. Rent was confused, trying to figure out what kind of voice it was that had appeared so suddenly. The fairy who appeared called him Lord and sincerely congratulated him on the evolution of his gift, opening a new chapter in his destiny. The fairy enthusiastically congratulated Rent on the evolution of his gift, addressing him with sincere respect and calling him Lord. She admitted that she had been looking forward to this meeting and had finally waited for this wonderful, exciting moment. According to her, the wait had lasted for as long as 5 years since his coming-of-age ceremony, and she could not have imagined that she would have to wait so long. Rent was amazed to realize who was in front of him, and could barely formulate the fact that in front of him stood a real fairy of the gift, the very one he had only heard about in legends and stories. The fairy happily confirmed his guess, adding that he had guessed absolutely correctly. Rent immediately remembered how, as a child, the village priest told him and other children that there was a special fairy destined to support the owner of a unique gift. Now it turned out that this story was not a fairy tale at all, but the real truth, which shook him to the depths of his soul. The fairy introduced herself with polite friendliness, saying that her official title was Magical Planner, but Rent could just call her Mappy. She said that she was excited to finally get to know him better and begin work. Rent, observing her lively manner of communication and appearance, noted to himself that she looked very cute, but at the same time he did not know how to react correctly and what to say in response. Suddenly, Mappy turned her attention to his appearance, and with an expression of mild annoyance, drew attention to the state of his equipment. She took out an abacus and began listing his belongings out loud. A worn iron breastplate, a shabby cloth cloak, old trousers and sandals. Rent asked with confusion in his voice how Mappy had gotten the abat in the first place. She did not answer directly, but confidently stated that it would cost 116 coins to buy normal basic equipment. In her opinion, if a person wants to work well and achieve results, he must look and equip himself accordingly. Rent turned his thoughts again and thought that the fairy, despite her cute appearance, was behaving rather strangely and unpredictably. He asked her if his gift had really gone through the evolutionary stage. Mappy confirmed his words, adding that now was the best time to check his parchment, since the description of his gift would also be updated when he evolved. She read out loud that his gift was now called Infinite Magic Storage. His current magic level was 776 out of 1210, and his adventurer rank was E. Rent immediately noticed that the parchment had indeed changed. The storage was now called Infinite. He also noticed that the name of the gift had changed completely. Remembering the experiences of his former comrades, he realized that Guy and the others' gifts also developed over time as they fought. For example, the swordsman profession could become an advanced swordsman. Seeing the SSS designation, he reacted with surprise because he had previously believed that the S rank was the highest possible level. Mappy just chuckled and suggested that he take a closer look at the symbol next to his gift. Rent saw the new sign and didn't understand what it meant, so he looked at Mappy again. The fairy explained that this symbol was a sign of infinity. From now on, he would never have to worry about capacity again, because now he could store an unlimited amount of magic without any restrictions. Rent couldn't immediately comprehend what he had heard, uttering only an exclamation of surprise. Mappy picked up the very same piggy bank that he had previously used as a storage image, and said with a smile that it was a truly lovely thing. Rent reacted to her words with shock, because for him, the word infinite now took on a completely new meaning. Mappy continued, explaining that in order to develop an infinite magical storage, 2 conditions must be met. The first condition is that the possessor of the gift must have accumulated a certain amount of magical power. The second condition is the presence of an extremely strong emotion, when a person with all his soul, with all his heart, wants to repay his debt. Ren suddenly realized that during the last argument, he had been in the middle of a very strong emotion, and had been shouting loudly about getting his magic back, and that was most likely what had been the deciding factor. Mappy said that these conditions are not really that difficult, and expressed surprise that it took him as long as 5 years to achieve evolution. Rent responded with restraint that everything was not as simple as it seemed from the outside. Mappy asked with interest what he meant. Rent explained that he had been afraid throughout this time, had tried to be patient, and had always tried to act in the best interests of the party without upsetting the balance. He admitted that if he had been more confident, he might have asked for the magic back sooner, but had been hesitant to do so. He remembered how, when he asked for his magic back, his squad members reacted with disbelief, accusing him of ingratitude and asking how he could demand magic after all the adventures they had shared. Rent admitted that deep down he believed that once they got back on their feet, they would definitely return everything, because he trusted them. Mappy was touched to say that he was indeed a very kind person, saying this with genuine admiration. Mappy responded with a mischievous grin, calling him a kind local fool, as if making fun of his naivete. Rent was instantly indignant, not expecting such a nickname, and tried to object. But Mappy continued without pause, saying that now was the time to check if he had anything new, especially with the recent changes to his gift. Rent opened the parchment and, looking at the updated data, was surprised to see that he had another evolution. He read that his skills were now not only borrowing magic power, but also forced collection. He also noticed a strange, huge number displayed next to the name Boundless Sky Sword, 2,678,087. Mappy explained that this number represented the total amount of magic power he had lent to his former unit over the past 5 years. She added that these were accumulated units of energy, given to them free of charge and without return. Rent was amazed at the scale. It was a surprise to him that the amount had reached such incredible figures. The fairy pointed to another line, explaining that the number below was the amount of magic power that could be collected back with the new skill. It was 1,435,837 units that he could withdraw in 1 calendar year. That was how much the activated forced collection skill allowed him to return. Rent was shocked to realize that he now had the opportunity to get back all the power he had been transmitting for so many years, and even said it out loud, as if he didn't believe it. The thought flashed through his mind that everything could really come back to him. All that energy he had been giving away so irretrievably was now being returned. He began to understand why Mappy's face had looked so serious back then. He spoke loudly to her, asking how he could use this new skill, as if he was eager to begin immediately. The fairy asked him to remain calm and not to panic. She explained that there were certain conditions for the ability to activate. One of the main requirements is the conclusion of a contract with the debtor, to whom the collection is directed. Rent thoughtfully repeated the word contract, realizing that now the relationship with his former comrades would be built according to new rules. Mappy added that there are more complex options for returning magic without a contract, but they require effort and knowledge. However, if he wants, she will take it upon herself, because he is still a beginner. Rent agreed, feeling that in her hands the job would be done more accurately and safely. The passers-by on the street, seeing Rent talking to the invisible Mappy, looked at each other. One of them remarked that it was better not to interfere in other people's affairs, and suggested that they go away. The next morning, Guy, in a good mood, noted that the evening had been successful, and now it was time to head to the guild to find a new member for the squad. But suddenly he saw Rent and stopped abruptly. He said his name in surprise, not expecting to meet him again. Elle reminded that Rent had already been kicked out of their team, and therefore had nothing to do with them. Guy confirmed this, saying that there was no longer any room for him in their squad. Misa, approaching him, reported that it was just in time. In her hands was a bundle of things. She reported that the innkeeper had put a lot of effort into collecting all this junk, and they were already thinking about how to get rid of it. Rent, without saying a word, handed them a piece of paper with the number 2,678,087 on it. He explained that this was the amount of magical power he had lent them over all the years of their travels together. Guy, not immediately understanding the meaning, looked at the sheet. Rent said he came to see if they were willing to give back everything he had given them. Guy asked again mockingly, as if he didn't believe the seriousness of what was said. Misa reacted irritably, expressing doubt and calling it a fabrication. Rent sternly ordered them to be quiet. He explained that when someone borrows something, they are obliged to return it. His gift was not an ordinary tool like the bracelets they use now. Guy, feigning calm, came closer, grabbed Rent by the clothes, and rudely declared that he dared to ask for something in such a tone. He added that Rent should show more respect because he is just a little runt. Elle giggled as she watched the scene. Rent, gathering his will, lowered his head and said in a restrained voice that, in that case, he humbly asked them to return all the magical power that he had ever given them. Guy kicked Rent mercilessly in the head, pinning him to the ground, and said with contempt that they would never get anything back. He added that he should not show himself to them again and said goodbye, saying that perhaps they would meet again someday, in a different, more unpleasant setting. At this moment, Mappy informed A that the Central Information Agency had completed the identification of the debtor, the contract had been successfully concluded, and now the gentleman could activate the new skill. Rent activated the ability called Forced Collection with full determination. Meanwhile, Guy continued the conversation, laughing and claiming that Rent was being extremely annoying. Elle admitted that she was even a little surprised by his return. Guy explained that after what he did to Rent, he would hardly ever dare to come near them again. Misa added that perhaps she should have taught him an even harsher lesson, so that he would never forget this lesson. Guy praised her for her sternness, saying that she had a sense of strength. Misa, hearing this, called out his name, but did not finish. At this time, Rent used his ability. Misa suddenly felt a strange excitement, and said in a reserved voice that she might have felt something unusual. Guy asked if this feeling was related to the way Rent looked, as if he was still watching them. Misa reacted with surprise at his words. She waved it off, saying it was complete nonsense, and Guy laughed, enjoying their reaction, until he suspected that in fact everything had just changed. Mappy suddenly turned to Rent and apologized, saying it with a remorseful expression on her face, as if she had just realized that she had said something inappropriate. Rent was surprised by her tone and asked what exactly had gotten into her that she was suddenly apologizing for no apparent reason. The fairy, without changing her frivolous tone, replied that, according to her observations, that same Guy had mastered magic much better than Rent himself. She added that this was just her feeling, without insisting. Rent, hearing such a comparison, became wary and with a hint of indignation called her by name. Mappy quickly explained and said that it was just a joke and had no serious meaning. Rent wondered to himself if it was really just a joke, because there was a strange sincerity to her words. Suddenly, the storage he had previously imagined as a piggy bank began to collect the magical power he had borrowed earlier. The process started automatically, and it shocked him. Rent was frightened and said with surprise that it seemed like everything worked. Mappy confirmed with satisfaction that the collection was successful, and everything corresponded to the terms of the concluded contract. Rent exclaimed that from now on, all the magical power accumulated over the years by his former comrades would automatically be collected in his storage, as if by some unknown law. He looked at the storage indicator and noted with encouragement that the amount of magic had actually begun to increase right before his eyes. At that moment, the same mysterious voice he had heard before resounded in his head, informing him that the condition for acquiring a new skill had been successfully met. Rent became wary because he heard the voice in his head again and did not immediately understand what it would lead to. The voice continued and said that he had learned a new skill called Magical Operation. Mappy commented with interest that it looked like he had just learned another useful skill. Rent read the description of the skill, which stated that the magic operation consumes the magic power of both the user and the storage, and increases the maximum magic power of the owner in the current state. He further read that for every 1,000 magic power spent, the maximum limit increases by 1. Mappy noticed that Rent looked confused and asked if everything was okay. Rent admitted that he simply expected something more grandiose from the new skill, something truly powerful. The fairy was indignant and reacted sharply, saying that he was completely wrong, because this skill is ideal for the growth and development of magical abilities. Rent, frightened by her gaze, hastily agreed and confirmed that she was right. However, he was still hesitant in his mind, because he already had an infinite supply of magic. Even if he raised his magic level now, he wasn't sure how much he needed it at the moment. He changed the subject and reminded Mappy that she had previously spoken of the existence of different types of forced collection. Now he wanted to know what types there were. Mappy, without losing her enthusiasm, tried to explain briefly, concisely and clearly. She said that there are 3 main types of forced magical energy collection. The first is called one time. This is a method in which all the necessary magic is extracted in one go. The second is called payment in installments. In this case, the volume and number of regular payments are agreed upon in advance. And finally, the third type, the most unusual and scary one, is called the gates to hell. This is a method in which the collections are renewed indefinitely. Rent heard the name, the gates to hell, and became wary. He imagined something terrible, as if there was something very dark hidden behind the name. Mappy calmly reported that this was exactly the type of gathering that had been concluded with their former squad at the current moment. Rent, still not fully understanding the meaning, tried to comprehend what could be so dangerous about these very renewable collections. Mappy replied that there was a lot behind it. She compared the method to a sand trap that was impossible to escape from, no matter how hard you tried. It was truly considered the most brutal and merciless way to collect a debt. However, according to the documents, everything looked quite harmless. A fixed amount, subject to return almost. Rent thought about it and said that it sounded like an installment plan. Mappy immediately objected. She explained that an installment plan is simply dividing the total amount into parts with subsequent equal collection, in which the debtor, despite the difficulties, at least sees the goal, full repayment of the debt. But in the case of renewable collections, the situation is completely different. Even if the debtor initially borrowed 100 or 10,000 units, the amount he is forced to pay back remains the same each time, and there is no end to this process. Rent, hearing all this, was amazed. Everything that was happening caused him at the same time fear and surprise, and a feeling that he now possessed a truly powerful force. Mappy began to explain the calculations to Rent with obvious excitement, citing the example of his former comrades, whom she contemptuously called scoundrels. She reported that the total amount of magical power of the 3 former members of the squad was 3,600 units. At the same time, their natural recovery was 10% of this amount every hour, that is, 360 units per hour. In a day, this came out to an impressive figure, 8,640 units of magical energy. In addition, Mappy added that with 3 bracelets, each of which restores 1,000 units, the maximum amount of magic that can be collected from these outcasts in one day increases to 11,640 units. She continued by saying that if collected continuously for a year, the total amount that could be obtained from the trio would be 1,435,837 units. In 10 days, it could bring in 8% of the total, which would give approximately 115,000 magic units at the end of the year. According to her, such a system seemed extremely efficient. Rent, hearing all this, reacted sharply. He was shocked and asked with alarm in his voice if he really would have to pay interest for using his own skills. Mappy confidently confirmed this, stating that this was the power of the infinite magic storage, and such percentages were part of its functioning. Inwardly, Rent felt deceived, and in his mind he compared Mappy to a moneylender, so cold-bloodedly and mathematically did she conduct her calculations. Meanwhile, Mappy continued her calculations. She noted that if 11,640 units were collected daily, 116,400 units could be collected in 10 days. and the interest that accrued over the same period was 115,000 units. Comparing these two amounts, she came to the conclusion that almost all of the magic collected went to paying off the interest. Mappy explained that the principal amount of the debt was hardly decreasing. Those she called slackers simply continued to pay the interest, and at the beginning of each new month, their total debt only increased. Rent was stunned and asked with alarm if this was really the kind of agreement that had been made with his former comrades. Mappy, without hiding her satisfaction, calmly confirmed this. Rent exhaled heavily, reminding him that he had left the decision on the terms of the contract entirely up to Mappy. The fairy said nonchalantly that everything would be fine. She reminded him that Rent's former comrades had never expressed gratitude to him, and now it was time for them to get what they deserved. She reminded him that these people had kicked him out of the unit they had created together, and therefore, in her opinion, they did not deserve a drop of pity. Rent called her name doubtfully. Mappy, without losing her temper, continued and said that now they had to hunt down these people, overwhelm them with their new power, plunge them into a deep abyss of despair, and make them regret every action they had ever taken. In her opinion, maybe they were the ones who were really incompetent. Rent called her name again, but louder this time. Mappy responded, still delighted, asking what he wanted. Rent admitted that everything that was happening was starting to scare him, and the atmosphere was becoming too gloomy. In the bar where they were, other patrons began to look around, hearing how he suddenly began to raise his voice. Some of them, surprised, noticed that Rent was acting strangely. Mappy tried to justify herself by saying that she had simply expressed his true feelings, only a little louder. Rent quickly stated that this was not the case and that she was mistaken. The fairy said in surprise that if he thought so, the contract could be changed at any time. Rent nodded, showing that he understood her. Mappy added that if Rent ever had to apologize for those she called trash, she would think about it. In her eyes, he was too kind, and most likely even a kind fool. Rent asked her to stop with annoyance. Mappy said with a grin that he was also a grumbler. At this time, Guy and his new squad were looking for new members. The selection took place in one of the halls, where many adventurers had gathered. One woman claimed that she was a natural thief and had incredible speed. Guy said without hesitation that they didn't need people like her, and turned her down. Then a man approached, claiming that his gift was dark magic, and that his age, he said, did not reflect his true power. Guy said with disdain that he did not want to deal with decrepit old men and ordered all participants to leave the room, ending the selection for the day. Elle, watching everything that was happening, expressed her disdain, saying that everyone who came was just a bunch of losers, and they could not compare to their beautiful and elite squad. Guy agreed with her completely. Misa showed the adventurer's datasheet and said that the man, judging by the description, could be useful, since he was a sniper. She added that he reminded her of someone she knew. Guy asked her with a grin if she missed Rent. Misa responded sharply that she couldn't stand that jerk with all her heart, and expressed joy that they were finally rid of him. She also stated that after all these adventures, she realized what kind of guys she really liked: men with a strong sense of self-worth, reliable, and possessing real strength. Guy said her name, but upon hearing this, Elle intervened and sharply told Misa not to dare flirt with her boyfriend. Misa, hearing this, became indignant and asked why Guy suddenly became her boyfriend. Guy, tired of the squabble, asked them to calm down. He noticed that Misa had a bruise on her neck and asked with concern where it came from. Misa suddenly screamed, looking with alarm at her skin, on which something strange had appeared. Elle noticed that the same thing had manifested itself in Guy, noting with surprise and slight concern that he had the same sign. Guy, looking at himself, did not immediately understand what was being discussed, but seeing this magical pattern, he exclaimed that something similar had appeared in both Elle and himself. Thus, it became clear that all three now had the same magical sign. Misa, dumbfounded, tried to understand what exactly they were dealing with, and asked what this strange symbol meant. Elle, with doubt, but also with a degree of confidence, said that, in her opinion, it was a magical sigil, a kind of seal or symbol associated with magic. Guy, with a confused expression, admitted that he did not remember any spell being cast on him, and he could not think of where it could have come from. Misa suggested that they all check their statuses, hoping that the internal parameters would clarify what they were dealing with. But when she looked inside, she was horrified to find that the magic power had disappeared. Meanwhile, Rent watched as the amount of magic in his vault increased again. He looked at the readings, and they clearly showed that the amount of magical energy had increased again. Mappy commented on what was happening with a satisfied grin. She expressed confidence that at that very moment, Rent's former comrades, whom she still called scumbags, were in a panic over the situation that had arisen, not understanding what was happening to them. Rent admitted out loud that if they suddenly realized that all of this was the result of his new skill, they would definitely start looking for him. And maybe even hunt him. Mappy reacted with surprise, calling him Lord, and asked with a slight mockery if he was really afraid of them. She added that in that case, he should just fight them off. Rent sheepishly objected, admitting that he did not have the strength to confront them in open combat. Mappy countered by reminding him that he had already learned many new skills. So, she said, now was the time to fully utilize the powers he had accumulated. And that should begin now. Rent realized that this seemed to be the next necessary condition for the evolution of his gift, to show determination, to use his powers to the fullest and not to retreat. Mappy, remembering, said with seriousness in her voice that on that day the soul of the master cried out to her, suffering from impotence, from days filled with pain and neglect. She remembered how he prayed for the birth of a new self, a real adventurer. His soul suffered because he was always dependent on others, living, clinging to someone else's strength and support. But all this was left behind. Now, as Mappy stated, he will follow his own path, experiencing his own unique adventures. She emphasized that he was incredibly strong, and now he needed to become more self-confident. And if difficulties arose on his path again, she promised to do everything possible to support him. Rent, hearing her words, almost cried. He said her name with sincere gratitude, thanked her for everything, and asked what their plans were for the near future. Mappy replied that in addition to managing the magic collection, she hoped that they could also focus on leveling up and developing skills. For starters, she suggested completing the path to the next rank and finishing off the current E rank. Rent excitedly said that he had a great suggestion. He said that on the outskirts of a town called Melba, there was an artificial garden created by an ancient sorcerer. He admitted that he had trained there for some time, after the formation of their former squad. Mappy immediately clarified where exactly this city was located. Rent explained that Melba was quite a distance away from here. Even if they went there by express carriage, the journey would take about 2 weeks. Mappy assessed the information and concluded that even if their former comrades began pursuing them, this trip would give them some time advantage. She suggested going to this city immediately. According to her calculations, in 3 weeks, if they trained hard and took advantage of opportunities, they would gain enough strength to defeat those who had once betrayed Rinka in the future. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Guy said out loud with irritation that he couldn't figure out how to get rid of this strange mark that had now appeared on their bodies. Rent activated his magic operations skill and started small, deciding to spend only 1,000 units of magic power. As a result, his maximum magic reserve immediately increased by 10 points, which was the first noticeable step in the growth of his potential. At this moment, the familiar voice in his head resounded once more, telling him that the condition had been successfully met. As soon as Rent used the magic operation, the recovery of magic power had doubled. Furthermore, the abilities related to force gathering as part of his bestowed role in the Boundless Sky Sword Squad had been adjusted. Rent was surprised and delighted to see that his magic power recovery had doubled. He reminded himself that it was usually 10% an hour, and now it had doubled, which was truly impressive. Mappy, watching this, smiled reservedly and noted that this was far from the limit. However, she suggested using the skill with caution for now, so as not to allow unforeseen consequences. Meanwhile, nearby, a man driving a cart announced that transport to Melba was preparing to leave and asked everyone to hurry. Elsewhere, an old man, an expert in ancient magical texts, sat among piles of manuscripts, thinking. He turned over the pages and muttered to himself that neither this part nor that part corresponded to his expectations. He was trying to decipher one of the ancient sigils that was unfamiliar to him. It was a riddle he had not encountered before. Misa, who was standing nearby, irritably reminded the old man that he still had not been able to figure out the meaning of this symbol. The old man said excitedly that he had been working in the field of magical research for over 80 years and never thought that one day he would encounter an unknown spell that would be beyond his control. Guy, watching this impatiently, shouted irritably that he should not pity them with his memories, but rather start solving their problem. The old man began to apologize in a panic, rising with difficulty from his seat. Later, Guy and his party fought the monsters in close combat. Misa cast a fireball spell, launching it towards the enemies. Guy, having received a blow, shouted that he had been hit. He admitted that usually the opponents do not even have time to get close to him. Misa added that they were lucky, as the spell cast on them was not permanent. She suggested that it could be dealt with by drinking a potion to replenish their magical resources. However, she quickly reminded them that the cost of a magic restoration potion was 10,000 gold per bottle. Guy asked how many bottles she had left. Misa replied that she had about 50 bottles. Guy asked again, dumbfounded. Misa. She confirmed, adding that she spent 500,000 gold on them. Guy realized they had no choice and accepted that they would have to make do with what they had. Misa said with concern that these supplies would soon run out, and they needed to remove the curse urgently. Guy cursed in irritation, calling the whole thing a pain in the ass, and asked Elle to help him recover. Elle said with sadness in her voice that she couldn't do it because she had no more magic left. Guy exclaimed in disbelief, asking her to simply drink the potion to replenish her magical reserves. Elle refused, explaining that she did not want to drink the potion because it was bitter. Guy began to lose patience and scolded her, saying that she was acting like a child and that without magical power, she became completely useless. Misa, sensing the tension, tried to stop him. Guy waved it off, irritably stating that it wasn't his fault that Elle refused to use magic. Elle started crying and said she just wanted her magic back. Misa, hearing these words, suddenly remembered Rinka. The thought of him flashed through her mind, and she thought with horror that perhaps he was the one who cast this spell. Meanwhile, Rent sat next to Mappy, admiring the surrounding nature. He asked her with a smile if she liked watching such landscapes. Mappy responded with delight that she simply adored such a sight. She asked what kind of volcano was visible on the horizon. Rent explained that this was the Gremo volcano. According to legend, a real dragon's nest was located at its summit. Mappy reacted with admiration, saying it was amazing. Rent noted in his mind that he hadn't expected to hear Mappy say she didn't know anything. He thought she knew everything. The 6th day of his wanderings had passed. All this time, Rent had been actively using skills, collecting magical power and increasing his own magical reserve. Thanks to the constant use of the magic operation, his current maximum magic level has already reached 4,709 units, which is quite comparable to that of legendary magicians. He admitted that the magical operation was an extraordinary skill, allowing him to freely move energy between his own body and the infinite storage of magic. Rent knew that he didn't yet fully understand how to use the full potential of this skill, but, as Mappy said, in time he would definitely master it to its full extent and learn its true power. He took a deep breath and told himself that all they could do now was continue on their way, and with each passing day he looked forward to more and more improvements. In Rent's head, the same voice rang out, and with cold precision, it reported that a total of 350,000 units of magical power had already been spent on the magical operation. This meant that the condition for the new level had been met, and now the level of the magic operation skill itself had increased by 1. Moreover, something new had become available, a skill called Purchase. Rent was taken aback by what he heard. His first reaction was a mixture of surprise and confusion. Mappy did not hide her joy and congratulated him with delight, saying that he really did it. Rent immediately looked at his parchment to find confirmation, but at first glance there was nothing new. He noticed this with bewilderment. Mappy explained that it was simple. You just need to run your finger across the parchment from bottom to top, as if the sheet were being magically turned over. Rent, following her instructions, made a move and was surprised to see something unexpected. Information that he had not noticed before appeared on the parchment. Mappy cheerfully replied that it was a great collection of skills and suggested taking a closer look. Rent read the notes and was amazed. Skills that, according to legend, were usually only available through the will of the god himself appeared before him. Under normal circumstances, no one could obtain such abilities, but now it turned out that they could be purchased. Mappy explained with pride that he now understood why infinite magic storage was a unique gift of the SSS rank. She then asked him what kind of adventurer he wanted to be, offering help and advice as he could now gain almost any skill he could desire. They arrived in the town of Melba. Mappy noted with interest that the town was bustling with activity. Rent said it made perfect sense. Adventurers from all over the world come to this city to challenge the great labyrinth of Melba. Mappy clarified that, as far as she remembered, Rent had been here before when he had just started his first journey. Rent confirmed this. Later, at the guild reception, the girl asked him if he was a member of any squad. She asked if he really wanted to change his location from the previous city to Melba. Rent answered affirmatively that this was exactly the case. The girl at the reception desk informed him that the registration was complete, and he was now officially eligible to enter the Great Labyrinth. She congratulated him on this achievement. Rent said he would now have a real advantage. Mappy added that even if a squad of traitors decided to pursue them, there was no need to fear them now. Melba's Great Labyrinth. Mappy pointed excitedly towards the dungeon, inviting the master to step forward. On the first floor of the dungeon, which was called the Great Plains, the recommended adventurer rank was listed as F. Mappy was a little puzzled, and didn't expect this level. Rent explained that Melba's Great Labyrinth was a space created by an ancient sorcerer. No one knew exactly what this place was. Suddenly, they encountered a Mimitobi rat. Despite its size, it was ferocious and especially dangerous because it fed on human flesh. Mappy reminded them along the way that they now had melee combat skills. Rent confirmed that the dagger he now used was intended for self-defense, but admitted that he almost never used it in practice. Mappy said that now was the time to try out this weapon in a real fight. The voice announced that the first-level dagger art had been activated, with a cost of 1,000 units of magic power. Mappy continued and suggested trying a ranged attack. Rent agreed and expressed the idea that he needed a spell that could be fired easily and accurately. He chose the Fireball spell. The voice confirmed the activation of first-level fire magic with the same consumption, 1,000 units of magic. Mappy praised him for mastering the new spell so quickly. Rent exclaimed that he was now not only agile and fast, but also capable of using magic. The voice activated 2 new skills at once. Level 1 Body Strengthening with a cost of 5,000 units of magic and magic manipulation, also level 1, and with the same cost of use. Rent was pleased to note that all of this was made possible thanks to Mappy's recommendations. Mappy noticed the items dropped by the defeated enemies and exclaimed in surprise. Rent explained that these were magical stones. When they defeat demons in the dungeon, they turn into stones that match their power level. If they bring these stones to the guild, they can be exchanged for money. Mappy was fired up by the idea, and admitted that she suddenly felt a strong motivation. In the dungeon nearby, other adventurers were panicking. One of them loudly declared that he had run out of recovery medicine and asked the others to hurry, because if they could hold out, they could make money. Mappy laughed and called it classic newbie behavior. Rent calmly added that they themselves had once been like that. He remembered that before he simply stood behind and only lent magic to his squad, without directly participating in the battle. Mappy suddenly noticed that the Mimitobi rats had approached again and were now aiming straight at them. Rent knew that everything would be different now. His heart was beating like crazy. He had never felt such excitement before. Later, after another battle, Rent used a restoration spell. The voice announced that the first-level restoration magic had been activated. The cost of using it was 1,000 magic units. Mappy noted that at this rate, they would be able to reach the next level of the labyrinth pretty soon. Rent agreed but added that he would like to stay here longer to properly test his strength. Mappy supported his decision with approval and said that it sounded great. They agreed to do just that. A few years ago, on a quiet day, young Rent turned to Misa with hope in his voice and reminded her of his old dream, a dream of real adventures. He wanted to know if she remembered it. Misa, without hesitation, answered with firmness and sincerity. She said that of course she remembered. She admitted that she had always thought about him, and that was why, when she became an adventurer herself, she decided that she wanted to be near him. But her words suddenly took on a sharp edge, as she stated outright that Rent was completely useless. It was at that moment that Rent woke up, letting out a sharp breath. It turned out that it had all been just a dream, which made his heart clench. Later, he was located on the second level of the Great Labyrinth of Melba. in an area called the Great Goblin Sea. This space was recommended for adventurers of at least level E. Mappy, looking around, commented that there was nothing but dense thickets around, which made movement difficult. The system's voice activated and announced that a level 1 presence detection skill had been used, consuming 5,000 units of magic power. Rent concentrated and determined that there was a group of goblins ahead. Their numbers were such that they must have been a colony. He reasoned that individually the creatures were not a serious threat, but in a group they became problematic due to their coordinated attacks. Mappy noted with anticipation in her voice that it was time to put all the acquired skills to maximum use. Rent agreed. He realized that now was the time to show what he could do. The voice announced the activation of the first level signal blocking skill, which also required 5,000 units of magic. Rent then used the magic energy release skill, followed by a fireball spell. He mentally noted that he was now able to cast spells in sequence, one after another, which gave him incredible flexibility in combat. This feeling made him happy and confident. Mappy, watching him, explained that the expenditure of magic power is actually a huge burden on the body. She gave an analogy. She asked if he could run for a long time and quickly. Rent admitted that he could not, because he got tired quickly. Mappy continued that it was the same with magic. Continuous use of spells was almost impossible. However, if the release of magical energy was used correctly, it was possible to wrap the power around the body and then release it at the right moment. This makes it possible to use the same spell in a row and now even release them simultaneously. Rent was surprised to realize that he had actually succeeded in doing this. At that moment, the Goblin Chieftain, the leader of the colony, appeared before them. The fight was short, with Rent dealing with the threat with lightning speed and efficiency, killing all of the enemies. Mappy was delighted. She said with admiration that he had conquered an entire colony of goblins single-handedly. Rent replied softly that he was not alone. After all, Mappy had been with him the whole time. The fairy smiled and admitted that it was nice of him. She then suggested that they continue in the same spirit and collect as many magic stones as possible. Later, at the guild, the receptionist girl began counting the magic stones obtained from the goblins. In total, she counted 1,341 stones, valued at 134,100 gold. For the stones obtained from the Goblin Chieftain, of which there were 21, the reward amounted to another 10,500 gold. Someone in the guild asked in surprise whether he really did all this alone. The girl continued counting. The other materials collected during the destruction of the colony were valued at 42,000 gold. Thus, the total reward amounted to 186,600 gold. Mappy, sitting in a tavern, was enjoying a fried squid dish with complete delight. She admired its crispy texture, fresh meat, and the amazing taste of the sauce. She admitted that she could not stop admiring this delicacy. Rent laughed and added that thanks to their efforts, his adventurer rank had also increased from E rank to D rank. He expressed confidence that if he fully utilized all the skills he had acquired, he would become even stronger. He also said that in the future, when he meets Guy and the others again, he will be able to stand up for himself. That's why he decided he needed to keep training. It wasn't just a wish, it became his goal. Mappy, looking at Rent, said that they had already changed cities, and therefore their former comrades would not be able to find them quickly. However, it all came down to time. Sooner or later, these fools would still find out about the concluded contract, and then they would surely come to sort things out. Mappy added that they needed to accumulate another 150,000 units of magical energy. If they succeeded, then they would be able to acquire new skills, meaning there would be no more fear of enemies. Rent looked at his current numbers and said with some doubt that he was still a long way from that goal. The parchment that displayed his current stats read, Rent, age 20, class Magic Guardian, magical energy level 100 out of a possible 4,712. His adventurer rank was listed as D. Mappy encouraged him enthusiastically, giggling, and confidently said that they would quickly reach the required level. She thanked him for the food she had just eaten with gusto. Rent offered her something else tasty if she wanted. Mappy perked up and mischievously asked if he had anything particularly tasty. Rent said without hesitation that he had everything she wanted because he wanted to thank her for everything she had done. Mappy, with a sparkle in her eyes, declared that this time her treat would be his magical power. Rent was surprised and asked if she was joking. Mappy nodded and explained that for fairies, magical power was like nectar, the best treat imaginable. Rent was outraged that she hadn't said anything about it before. Mappy shook her head and replied that becoming a master was the most important thing. Rent specified exactly how much power she needed. Mappy was happy that he agreed, and immediately voiced the desired figure, 100 units of magic. Rent looked at his stats and began to think about how to properly transfer the magic. He decided that it would be best to use a special skill for this. At this moment, Mappy suddenly prepared herself, pursing her lips and moving closer. Rent was taken aback and cried out her name. Mappy said that direct contact was needed to transmit magic. Rent turned pale and repeated this to himself, his voice filled with inner confusion. He slowly agreed and asked if he had done everything right. Mappy responded with satisfaction that it was wonderful. Rent was left in shock because, as he realized, he had just had his first kiss in his life. His thoughts immediately took him back in time several years ago. He remembered how they rode in a carriage together with Misa. Then Misa looked at him with admiration and said that he was incredibly cool. In her opinion, he had the most unique skill, and she always knew that he was destined to become an adventurer. Rent then responded that he remembered Guy telling him the same thing. He admitted that he had no choice, really, and laughed a little about it himself. Misa commented that Guy was just a swordsman, and that it was a fairly ordinary skill. D-rank gifts weren't that rare. She said that now they could all travel together. Rent happily agreed, adding that together they could create many new stories. Misa, blushing a little, said that adventures were good, but then hinted that she would like to be with him in other ways as well. Rent was surprised to hear this and said her name. Misa came closer and quietly asked if he loved her. Rent was embarrassed, but still said that, of course, he loved her. Misa approached him as if she was going to kiss him, but instead, she brought an apple to his lips. Rent accidentally kissed the fruit instead of touching her lips. He blushed and called her in surprise. Misa laughed and apologized, saying that she was not ready for a relationship yet. Rent replied with a smile that he understood and did not insist. At that moment, Guy's voice was heard, waking up and asking why they were making so much noise. Rent said in surprise that Guy was already awake. Misa replied that the city was still far away and that he could continue sleeping if he wanted. Present time. Rent opened his eyes after a short rest and began to think. Anger, despair, and a sense of loss were seething inside him. He thought about what his fate would have been if he had not met Mappy. He became curious about what he would have become in that case. Rent realized that the feelings he had for Mappy were different from love and simple affection. He looked at her sleeping face, which reflected calm. Mappy muttered in her sleep as if saying, "Delicious manna." Rent felt his heart heal. He felt alive again. Rent felt light and truly happy. He quietly wished Mappy good night. In the guild, a young woman reminded those present that, as had been said earlier, Mr. Rent was currently in this city. Hearing these words, Guy expressed extreme indignation, emphasizing that they had to spend several days searching for him, which made the appearance of this information especially unexpected. To this, the girl regretfully admitted that she was not pleased to hear about their futile efforts. After this, Guy expressed his displeasure with irritation and made it clear that he felt insulted, as if he was being perceived as naive or stupid. Misa, wanting to prevent the conflict from escalating, asked Guy to remain calm. Sometime later, the entire squad was carefully studying the ancient parchment, trying to find any clues in it. Misa confidently stated that her suspicions were confirmed, since the level of magical energy had noticeably decreased compared to the previous day. Guy, outraged by what was happening, suggested that Rent was stealing their magical power, which would pose a threat to the entire team. Misa admitted that until now, she had not paid any attention to such changes and had not kept track of the amount of magical energy she had borrowed. However, now it seemed very strange to her, since the magic bracelets, the general energy reserve, and the natural recovery processes of the squad as a whole did not explain such a clear decrease in strength. At the same time, the decrease in the amount of borrowed magic seemed so subtle to her that it only increased her anxiety. Guy tried to understand what she meant and expressed interest in her thoughts. However, Misa directly pointed out that she herself could not yet explain what was happening with complete certainty. Tired of constantly drinking potions, expressed dissatisfaction with how much longer they would have to depend on these expensive and unpleasant-tasting concoctions. Misa calmly explained that there was no alternative for now, and that if each of them drank 45 bottles of the potion, then the loss of magical energy during the day would be balanced out. In response, Elle capriciously stated that she did not want to continue doing this and suggested that the others drink to her. Guy, perplexed, responded with criticism to her frivolous statement. Misa, surprised, asked again if she really meant that others should do this for her. Later, the group arrived at the guild, where Misa approached an elderly man who introduced himself as grandfather and asked if he remembered them. The old man thought for a moment, and then expressed confidence that they belonged to the very same detachment he had heard about earlier. Misa was pleased to note that he remembered them, and informed them that they were currently facing many serious problems. The old man, not fully understanding what he was talking about, made a puzzled sound. Elle, trying to be convincing, stated that now they really needed his help. Hearing this, the old man asked again whether they really meant him. Sometime before these events, Misa suggested that everyone think about the nature of the spell, which, in her opinion, was aimed at taking away a certain amount of magical power from their entire squad. She suggested that the solution to the problem could be found in increasing the overall amount of magic in the group. To implement this idea, it was necessary to find a new ally with high magical potential. Guy approved of the idea, believing that such a move would help reduce the spell's effect on the remaining party members. Elle expressed delight and admiration, calling Misa a true genius. According to her calculations, the old man's magic level was as much as 4,200 units, which was indeed a very impressive result. In the present tense, Misa asked what he would say about this. The old man began to answer, but at that moment a man approached him, apologizing for the forced wait. The old man noted his appearance with relief. The man wondered who the girls standing nearby were. In response, the old man explained that they only wanted to ask him a few questions. Misa asked sharply if this meant that he was no longer free. The old man explained that the situation had changed, and that he had heard about a strange curse being cast upon them, and that this information had already spread throughout the guild. He also noted that he did not want to deal with anything like that. Misa, hearing this, spoke out with obvious indignation, accusing him of indifference. Elle tried to stop her, suggesting that they wait a little. The man approached and pointed out the situation with a grin. The woman standing next to him noted with disdain that they had previously refused to accept her into their group, and now, in her opinion, they looked humiliated. She added that it was not worth looking down on others. The man supported her, saying that apparently these girls had seriously offended someone and were now suffering because of the curse imposed on them. The woman agreed and regretfully admitted that she had even liked them before, but now everything had changed. The man concluded that their time was over. Guy, hearing this, became indignant and defiantly said that he understood perfectly well who they were talking about. Misa, overcome with anger, grabbed the old man by his clothes and sharply demanded that he stop talking nonsense, insulting him. Guy, amazed, repeated what he had said, as if he could not believe that someone dared to say that their time had passed. Elle, seeing the growing conflict, insistently demanded that they stop the quarrel. One of the guild's employees contacted the Boundless Sky Sword squad and reported that their request had been processed, and the guild now had information about Mr. Rent's current location. After these words, Misa expressed wild joy, as the news she heard was a real relief to her. Guy, immediately interested, began to insist on receiving an exact answer about where exactly Rent was. The guild worker stated with certainty that Mr. Rent was currently in a city named Melba. Misa was shocked by what she heard, as the name of the place was unexpected. Elle, hearing the name, remembered that this was the city where the Great Labyrinth was located. Misa was surprised to try to comprehend how Rent could be so far away from their current location. However, Guy, completely consumed by his thirst for revenge, stated that he did not care where exactly this place was, because he was going to find Rent and destroy him. Later, already in the dungeon, Mappy pointed to the entrance to the 3rd level, marking it as the next target. Rent warned that the monsters were becoming stronger and more dangerous, which meant that serious efforts had to be made to advance. On the 3rd level, in the Wraith Cave, the recommended adventurer category was listed as D rank. Mappy shared her impressions of the dungeon, noting that the dimly lit passages, heavy air, and overall feel created a genuine atmosphere of being trapped, reminiscent of a classic dungeon. Rent agreed with her words, admitting that his heart even began to beat faster. Mappy enthusiastically reported that she had a similar feeling. At that moment, a skeleton suddenly attacked them. Rent reacted with lightning speed and launched a quick attack. After the battle, he noted that the attack was unexpected, and suggested that the monsters in the area were guided by sound. Mappy suggested using mental speech transmission to avoid attracting attention. Rent was surprised to hear a voice in his head. Mappy reassured him, explaining that it was possible to speak that way too. Rent, realizing what was happening, called her by name. Mappy confirmed that she had heard him. Rent expressed mild irritation, adding that she should have told her about this useful ability during their carriage ride. Mappy laughed and apologized, explaining her forgetfulness with a touch of irony. Soon they continued on their way, and Rent entered into battle with new monsters. Mappy noted with enthusiasm that the third level was much more interesting and intense than the previous ones. Rent, in turn, drew attention to the fact that the caves were quite confusing, and emphasized that one must be especially careful not to come under attack from blind spots. Using his presence detection skill, he determined that there were adventurers nearby who were engaged in combat with a monster. However, when he saw the monster, his reaction changed. He suddenly rushed forward. Mappy asked worriedly what had happened. Rent explained that what had appeared before them was what was called an Irregular, an enemy that was much stronger than the normal monsters foreseen for this level. He explained that on rare occasions, demons from deeper floors could appear on the upper levels, and this was apparently what was happening now. Mappy, worried, expressed fear that he was about to interfere. Rent sadly admitted that perhaps he had been too soft-hearted to stay away. Mappy, taking this as an opportunity, reported that she already sensed a possible benefit in what was happening. While in a hurry, Rent accidentally ran into one of the adventurers. The adventurer reacted sharply and asked why he was running around like crazy. Rent immediately apologized for his carelessness. The second adventurer said irritably that now was not the time for talking. One of the women in the group added that if they wanted to survive, they should flee immediately. All three adventurers, despite their shame, admitted that saving themselves was wiser than dying, even if it meant fleeing in disgrace. They stressed that there was still a chance to survive, but not here. Mappy, watching the fleeing people, asked if these were the same adventurers who had been attacked. Rent answered confidently that no, as they had simply spotted an Irregular. However, he noticed that someone from the group had remained behind. Mappy assumed that this person had failed to escape, or had made a conscious decision to stay. Rent wasted no time and ordered them to move forward. Suddenly, Mappy stopped, stating that the path was blocked by a dead end. Rent pointed out that she should have looked more closely, as one of the walls had a different structure and was made of a different material than the others. He explained that the wall was a magical creation, radiating heat, and therefore was relatively new. At that moment, the thought of the three adventurers flashed through his mind, and he realized that they were the ones responsible for this trap. Rent asked Mappy to step aside, cast a fireball spell, and destroyed the magic wall. When the barrier disappeared, a four-armed skeleton appeared before his eyes. Mappy noticed that the master was in front. Right in front of them stood a girl who, despite the situation, refused to give up and issued a challenge, calling for an attack. During the battle, one of the men angrily demanded that the girl move faster, without holding back the rest of the group. She responded immediately, apologizing and promising not to hold up her comrades any longer. At this time, another man was treating the wounded man and casting a restoration spell. The first man expressed dissatisfaction that the treatment was taking too long. The healer, with a slight grin, noted that it was not worth worrying so much about trifles. The first man announced that their goal for the day was to break through to the third level, while the healer admitted that at the moment his magical reserves were only enough to avoid a fight with a whole horde of monsters. At this point, the girl gently reminded him that she herself needed medical attention. The man pointed at her wound with disdain, calling it a mere scratch. The healer refused to waste his remaining magic on her, explaining that he could not afford to waste resources on such minor injuries. Another girl standing nearby said with cold severity that Rinka was already useless, and now she had to finally pull herself together. Rinka responded by quietly apologizing again. The first man irritably reminded them that it was she who was constantly dragging the entire squad down, and that they were still in rank D solely because of her fault. A girl from their group warmly supported this point of view. The healer also added that if Rinka couldn't fight properly, then at least she should have stayed out of the way. Rinka again quietly asked for forgiveness, lowering her head. The same girl indignantly said that she was tired of listening to endless apologies and suggested that she finally show herself in action. Suddenly, the second man noticed with fear that it was not just the boss who had appeared in front of him, but something much more serious. The first man clarified that it was an irregular and turned to Rinka. She assured them with determination that she would not let them down this time. The man, with sarcastic approval, urged her to actually show some usefulness, just this once. After that, the three of them left her and erected a magical wall, cutting off Rinka from the exit. The healer grinned ominously. The leading man thought it was time to leave. Meanwhile, a heavy thought about what was happening began to form in Rinka's mind. She hoped that she was not mistaken, and that she had not really been abandoned, but merely left behind to buy them time and ensure a safe escape. But in her memory, the voice of the same man who had previously stated that it was because of her that the squad remained at the bottom and could not grow, clearly sounded. Clenching her will into a fist, she promised herself that she would fight until the very end. With desperate determination, she took a step forward, calling the enemy to attack, but then wavered. Her sword broke from the enemy's blow. Out of nowhere, Mappy intervened in the fight, loudly challenging the skeleton, calling him a knuckle, and peppering her speech with a phrase about the taste of a fireball. Rent appeared behind her and immediately offered to help and treat her. Rinka, noticing that the monster was still alive, screamed in horror as it began to rise again. Rent entered the fray, quickly assessing the situation. He realized that the monster was a difficult opponent, and the only way out was to strike at a vulnerable point. He cast a fireball spell and aimed at the monster's core. However, the enemy repelled his attack and threw Rent far back. Mappy cried out in panic, worried about his condition. Rent struggled to his feet, reported that he was generally fine, and claimed to have discovered the enemy's weak point. He completed the magic operation and used the fireball spell at 20 times its volume, attacking with a decisive blow. Meanwhile, in the city, other adventurers were discussing rumors. One of them noted with admiration that there was a real meteor shower in Melba, and suggested going there to observe the event. Roger, who was a member of the Meteor Shower squad, was signing autographs. One of the girls thanked him for his signature. Another man asked to sign his shirt. Roger asked if he was sure. The man enthusiastically confirmed that the signature would be his lucky charm for future travels. Roger nodded and agreed, since it was so important to the fan. Comet, also from the party, called Roger to eat, warning that if he did not eat his rice, he would take it himself. Roger responded, saying that he was almost finished. Comet refused to wait, adding that he had no intention of eating dry rice. Nemiria, another member of the squad, noted with a smile that Roger was as popular as always. Jin, who was part of the same group, solemnly declared that they were going to conquer the Great Labyrinth, and hoped that Lady Luck would smile upon them. The adventurers approved of their aspiration, expressing confidence in their success. Jean reminded that it was not a money bet. 3 adventurers entered the guild hall. One of them reported that an irregular had appeared in the Great Labyrinth, a huge skeleton with 4 arms. Roger reacted mentally, remembering the monster with 4 arms. The girl from the guild reception urgently clarified whether they were safe and where exactly they had managed to encounter this creature, promising that a strike team would be sent immediately. One of the men who abandoned Rinka said that they themselves were unharmed, but their friend named Rinka stayed behind to distract the monster. The receptionist, hearing this, was shocked, realizing that Rinka had probably sacrificed herself. The man confirmed her guess. The receptionist ordered to immediately check for signs of life in the labyrinth. Another guild employee clarified that it was about Rinka. The second man who participated in her betrayal remembered that Rinka never wished harm on anyone. The guild employee reported that she had good news. Rinka was still alive. The receptionist expressed joy about this. The adventurers, hearing about this, decided to immediately go to help. One of Rinka's former partners reacted with surprise. The man also expressed bewilderment. The second of those who abandoned Rinka reminded them that they had sealed her there. Roger said that their squad, would destroy the Irregular and save Rinka. The receptionist asked excitedly if they were sure about that. Comet replied with a grin that it would be great fun. Roger added that they had not been to the labyrinth for a long time and decided to take a short trip to restore the skill. The adventurer standing nearby responded with approval to these words, expressing hope and inspiration. Rent, having finished the battle, calmly said that their help was no longer needed, since he had already dealt with the enemy. One of those who had betrayed desperately uttered Rinka's name. Rent announced to everyone present that he had destroyed the Irregular and showed off the magic stone that remained from it. Roger, hearing a familiar voice, exclaimed in surprise and, coming closer, tried to make sure whether it was really Rent standing in front of him. Rent happily recognized his old acquaintance and noted that they had not seen each other for a long time. Roger, noticing the girl standing nearby, asked who she was. Rinka, without hesitation, introduced herself, gave her name, and explained that Mr. Rent had helped her escape from a mortal threat. The assembled adventurers expressed admiration and admitted that this guy really deserved respect. One of the men who had once abandoned Rinka confusedly recognized Renta as the same man they had passed by. Jin abruptly intervened and condemned their behavior, noting that at least a thank you should have been given to the one who had saved their former ally. Rent calmly but firmly stated that gratitude was not required in this case, because they were using Rinka as bait. The man who had dumped her earlier was at a loss as to how to react. Nymeria, shocked by what she had heard, asked in a low voice if it was really about bait. The guild member doubtfully reminded them that the men had assured them that Rinka had stayed voluntarily. The same man confirmed that this was exactly what had happened, adding that Rent, in his opinion, was simply delirious. In response, Rent took out a piece of wall and offered to take a closer look at it. The guild member, coming closer, clarified what exactly she was holding in her hands. Rent explained that in front of her was a piece of wall created with the help of magic, which was cast by those very people, in order to block the exit and trap Rinka. He added that if the structure of the stone were checked, it would be possible to determine exactly who created this magical barrier. The adventurers who were watching what was happening reacted with indignation, admitting that such behavior had already crossed all boundaries. The man who had previously abandoned Rinka began to get nervous and asked her to confirm his words and renounce what Rent had said. He screamed in desperation for her to stop being silent and explain the situation. Roger, unable to contain himself, said with fury that real adventurers are people who, despite all the risks and mortal dangers, chose to trust their comrades because every day could be their last. He condemned the men as scoundrels capable only of betraying and abandoning, adding that they did not deserve the right to continue to live among others. Roger, in a rage, put his sword to the throat of one of the men, showing the full extent of his contempt. Fugue, who was standing nearby, gently placed his hand on Roger's shoulder, thus calling him to calm down. Roger, with an effort, contained his anger and agreed not to let it come to bloodshed. A guild member who was watching the scene asked with a heavy look if they thought there was any justification for their actions. Roger, as if ignoring the question, suggested that they go hunting for a change. Jean supported his suggestion without hesitation. Roger, addressing Rent, called him loudly by name. Rent responded readily. Roger, smiling, asked if Rent would be free the day after tomorrow evening. Rent, a little surprised, remained silent, not understanding what the question was about. Roger turned around and said easily that they would definitely meet again. Nymeria, passing by, wished Rent all the best and said goodbye. Jin, placing his hand on Rent's head, approvingly assessed his work. Comet, slightly pushing him in the side, reminded A not to stand in the aisle and let him pass. Fuga immediately apologized, stepping aside. Rent calmly replied that there was no problem. Mappy commented with a slight smile that this was quite a rowdy group. Rent laughed and acknowledged with nostalgia that this was the legendary group called Meteor Shower. One of the guild members addressed Rent and Rinka in a respectful tone, informing them that that was all, and that she thanked them for their cooperation. The crystal used to verify the veracity of the words had been emitting a soft blue light all this time, confirming the truth of their testimony. Hearing this, Rinka could not contain her excitement and wanted to know what happened to the three people who had previously abandoned her. The guild member immediately explained that they had just been interrogated in a separate room. For their behavior, as well as for falsely reporting to the guild, these adventurers faced severe punishment, including a long term of correctional labor and lifelong exclusion from the ranks of adventurers. They had a long and hard time in the mines ahead of them. Rinka, hearing this, responded with restraint, nodding with understanding. Later, when she was alone with Rent, she thanked him again from the bottom of her heart. Rent, looking at her, asked what she was going to do next. Rinka honestly admitted that she had no clear plans, since her previous team had broken up and now she was alone. Rent, wanting to cheer her up, took out his bag and with a slight smile showed how much money they had earned for destroying that very skeleton, adding that it was all possible thanks to her. He suggested celebrating this and at least treating her. Rinka, embarrassed, muttered that it was not at all necessary and she even felt awkward about such a proposal. Rent suddenly opened up and admitted that he too had once been abandoned by his squad mates. Rinka was surprised to learn this. Rent calmly said that since they were here, he was ready to listen to all her complaints and worries. Rinka admitted with pain in her voice that she had been abandoned by other adventurers 7 times already. Rent, hearing this, was shocked and had a hard time comprehending that so many betrayals had actually happened. Rinka continued and said that her heart ached from all of this, but she couldn't just leave because her gift didn't allow her to abandon the battlefield. The parchment that accompanied her personal file stated, Rinka, 18 years old, gift Path of Assura, rank SSS. Rent turned this information over in his mind, amazed at how rare and powerful her gift was. He said out loud that this gift was considered unique. Rinka, looking down, said that there was nothing behind these beautiful words, because she was so weak that she could not even cope with her own sword. However, her gift forced her to fight until the very end, until death. This was her fate. Rent, hearing these words, warmly told that he too had suffered because of his own gift. His former comrades had left when he had become useless to them. He hated his weakness, but at some point, his gift saved him. He revealed that his ability was called Infinite Magic Storage and added that it was also a unique skill, just like hers. Rinka was surprised and asked again with hope if they really were so similar. She picked up the piggy bank and wondered if she could ever be as confident as he was. Rent, looking at her with a smile, offered to form a squad with him. Rinka was surprised to hear this, as she had not expected such a proposal. Rent explained that his gift was to support others, and that he was sure that they would work well together. Rinka's memory flashed back to the cruel words of her former comrades, who accused her of being useless and called her gift trash, claiming that without her, they would be much stronger. She looked down and said sadly that working with her would only slow him down and that perhaps she would be better off continuing on her own. At that moment, a quiet chuckle was heard. Rinka looked around in fear and noticed Mappy. Mappy greeted her warmly, introduced herself, and said it was nice to meet her. Rent noticed Rinka's fright and noted that her scream was unexpected. Mappy explained that she was helping Mr. Rent. Her name was Mappy, and she was a fairy. Rinka reacted with surprise when she learned that a real fairy was standing in front of her. Mappy apologized for scaring her. She explained that she had previously only been visible to Rentu, but thanks to the development of his abilities, she could now show herself to others if she wanted. She also asked Rinka not to poke her and added that Mr. Rent would never judge her because he considered her a valuable investment. Rinka, slightly embarrassed, asked again what the word meant. Investment. Rent, in response, began to be indignant about what Mappy was talking about. Mappy explained that it was a compliment. Rent explained that if she worked with him, she would definitely become stronger, and as she grew, so would his own potential. That was the essence of his gift, mutual benefit. Rinka asked excitedly if she really had the opportunity to become strong. Rent confidently confirmed it. Then he noted that she most likely did not believe it yet, so he suggested that they try their union for at least one day. Rinka, remembering that he had saved her life, replied that she would believe him. At least, she promised to try. After some time, the guild employee approached them again and asked if they wanted to register a new squad. Rent confirmed his consent. The employee asked what exactly their group would be called. Rent confidently said the name of their new union, Double Deviation. Misa was buying 20 restorative potions. The seller, having approached Misa, called her with slight familiarity, calling her sister. Misa reacted with displeasure, expecting an explanation. Man admitted that it was hard for him to say something like that to a regular customer. but he still had to warn her. The potion worked by essentially lending magic forward. If you used it too often, you could run into serious problems. Misa frowned and replied defiantly that it seemed he was trying to lecture his clients. She stated that they didn't use the potion very often. The man shrugged and calmly agreed, although there was a hint of irony in his voice. Misa snorted in irritation. The man chuckled and added that it was the same scenario every time. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, an express carriage bound for Melba was being prepared for departure. The passengers who had taken their seats inside were talking among themselves and looking at those who had sat down last with surprise. One of them recognized them as members of the two-headed Silver Wolf Squad and assumed that they were B-rank adventurers. The second confirmed that with such fellow travelers, the trip promised to be safe. Guy, dissatisfied with their places, approached the squad with a proposal to change places. Elle, smiling, remarked that she envied their soft and comfortable seats. Misa added with irritation that their own seats were terrible. Guy repeated the request, urging them to give up their seats. Destra, one of the members of the double-headed Silver Wolf Squad, curiously asked who they were. Sinistra, another member of the squad, immediately recognized them and reminded them that they were from the Boundless Sky Sword Squad, one of the fastest-growing B-rank squads in history. Guy, smiling, also recognized his interlocutors and noted that they always dragged themselves at the end of the list of B-rank squads. Roly, another member of their group, exclaimed indignantly, reproaching Guy for mocking him. Guy responded by saying that he must have touched a sore spot. Roly threatened him not to laugh at them anymore. Destra decided that it was not worth making the situation worse and offered to give them their seats. Sinistra supported this decision. The other girls tried to object, but Destra firmly said that they were happy to give up these places to the glorious squad. Misa unceremoniously asked them to move. Guy chuckled in response and commented that they were weaklings. He also asked Misa if she had brought any alcohol. Misa nodded with a satisfied smile. Sarika, who was watching what was happening, noticed that these adventurers were not at all nice and asked the leader if he was sure that his decision was correct. Destra calmly explained that the express carriage delivered passengers to their destinations twice as fast as a regular express coach. This was achieved because the carriage traveled along extremely dangerous paths unsuitable for most other means of transport. He also recalled the unspoken rule. The person sitting at the end of such a carriage actually became the guardian of the entire journey. And these three themselves chose this role for themselves without even realizing it. Sarika looked at them with distrust and pointed out that they were acting too carefree, laughing and drinking as if everything going on around them did not concern them. Destra urged her to keep quiet. Sinistra expressed doubt that a B-rank squad could be so frivolous. Shannon, another member of their group, snorted and admitted that she couldn't stand these guys. At this time, two men watching from outside noted how eerie the forest remained. One of them noticed that orcs were visible ahead and reported with horror that they had already dealt with the guard convoy. According to their calculations, there were at least 3 orcs ahead. They came to the conclusion that reinforcements were urgently needed. Destra, hearing this, realized that their squad had work to do. Roly shouted for everyone to rise and prepare for battle. Guy asked him angrily why he was shouting so loudly. Destra briefly explained that they had assigned the fight to these 3, suggesting that they show what they were capable of, since the enemy were high orcs. Guy confidently reminded them that their squad belonged to rank B, and it was not difficult for them to deal with the orcs. Destra divided the targets. The right orc was to be taken by the squad of the two-headed wolf, the left one by their own squad, and the central one was to be neutralized by the guard convoy. The convoy confirmed their readiness a little hesitantly. Destra also added that they were in a deep forest full of dangers, so they had to finish the battle as soon as possible before other monsters appeared. He stated that, as always, they should deal with the enemies as quickly as possible. Sarika activated the speed-up spell, spreading its effect to her entire squad. Roly used a combat technique called Chains of Humility, quickly pinning down his opponent. Shannon created a fire tornado that engulfed the area around her in a powerful vortex. Sarika noted with cold precision that the time it took to destroy the enemies was 7 seconds, and while it wasn't a new record, it was considered quite respectable. One of the guard convoy fighters attacked the enemy with a shout, but despite his efforts, the convoy failed to cope with the task and found itself in a difficult situation. Destra and Sinistra came to the rescue, who harmoniously used a combat combo called Silver Scissors, dealing with their opponents in an instant. The escort fighter expressed his sincere gratitude, calling them magnificent. Destra modestly noted that they too had behaved with dignity. Rolly added, however, with some doubt that not everything went perfectly. Meanwhile, Guy loudly ordered Elle to use her strengthening magic. Elle responded that she couldn't do so because she hadn't drunk the potion yet. Misa, clutching her stomach, exclaimed in irritation that she felt sick after just one bottle. Guy furiously called them useless idiots. Rolly, watching from the sidelines, asked with growing indignation what they were doing. Misa warned anxiously that the enemy was approaching and asked Guy to take action. At this time, the thought flashed through Guy's head that if the potion did not have time to work, he would be left practically without strength. Despite the fear, he declared to himself that he would not give his skills to anyone. He rushed forward, but was instantly knocked down by an orc's blow. Misa screamed in horror, calling him an idiot and doubting whether he was an ordinary orc, since their squad had once easily destroyed dozens of such enemies. Guy angrily ordered her to be quiet. He mentally cursed everything that was happening, desperately regretting that he could not use his power to the fullest extent. He firmly knew that if he had possessed sufficient magical energy, everything would have been different. Meanwhile, the last orc was once again finished off in an instant by Destra and Sinistra, ending the fight without further ado. Destra declared the battle over. Sinistra added that the way was now clear. Destra respectfully apologized for the intrusion, explaining that they were simply protecting the wagon, doing their duty. Sinistra confirmed that there was no personal motive, only protection. Guy, breathing heavily and holding his wound, said with irritation that their help was not needed and that they could have handled it themselves. Destra replied with a slight mockery that it was nice to believe. Sinistra added that reputation was a fragile thing. Guy screamed, asking them to stop, and began to shout indignantly, demanding an explanation. However, his voice broke from pain. Sinistra turned to Sarika and told her to start treating the victims. Sarika was surprised because it meant she would have to spend a significant amount of magical energy. Sinistra calmly assured that it would not require much. One of the convoy fighters watching what was happening said doubtfully that they hardly believed that in front of them was actually one of the leading detachments of Rank B. Rolly, looking at his comrades from the Boundless Sky Sword Squad, admitted that it seemed like the rumors were true, as there were rumors that they had been cast a spell that completely deprived them of the ability to use skills. The convoy fighter added that if they were really so confident in their rank, they should have been able to fight even without skills. Otherwise, there was no point. Sarika, without wasting any time, loudly ordered everyone to stand up immediately as they needed to get away before more monsters arrived. The passengers in the carriage, who were watching all this, were shocked and whispered among themselves that everything that was happening was much more serious than they could have expected. Gaius, leaning heavily on his sword, declared that they would have won if it weren't for the mark placed on them. Misa agreed with him, adding that it was that idiot who was to blame. Guy added angrily that he would remember that name Rent. One of the guild members finished the paperwork and announced with a professional smile that the new squad's registration had been successfully completed. She wished them a pleasant and safe journey. Following this, the system's voice rang out, loudly and clearly voicing the data. A squad called Double Deviation, registered in Melba, had received an initial rank of F. Its members were Rent and Rinka. A notification sounded that they had been assigned to the second unit, and that all the conditions for skill growth had been met. The magic ability called Borrowing Magic had risen to level 2. Rinka, noticing what was happening, was surprised by the sudden changes. Rent enthusiastically reported that his skills had apparently improved. He read the name of the new skill, Autocompensation, and tried to understand what it was all about. Mappy, hovering nearby, explained that when the debtor's magic level fell below a set minimum, this skill would automatically replenish his magic power. This meant that there was no longer a need to constantly monitor the level of companion's magic in the heat of battle. Rent found this to be an extremely convenient innovation. Rinka, suddenly remembering one detail, turned to Rent and told him that she had used the same repair fluid that he had lent her the day before. She smeared it on her damaged armor, and it looked brand new again. Rent, hearing this, was glad that the thing had been useful. Then he suddenly exclaimed, as if he had remembered something important. Rent reminded her that her sword had been broken in the last battle. He said that he had brought the weapon that had once belonged to the skeleton and melted it down, turning it into something new. The blacksmith standing nearby confirmed that the material was indeed excellent and added that he was glad to work with such high-quality raw materials. He assured that everything had already been paid for, so Rinka could feel free to just take a new blade. Rent eagerly asked how she liked the weapon. Rinka said with admiration that the sword was amazing. It was so sharp that she believed it could cut through anything. She thanked Rent with sincere appreciation. The blacksmith, looking at her, felt a strange premonition for a moment. The thought flashed through his mind that for a moment Rinka seemed to him the most frightening swordsman in the whole world. Later, already on the second level of the Great Melba Labyrinth, Rinka decided to explain in detail the essence of her abilities. She said that her most useful skill was called self-enhancement. This skill allowed the use of magical energy to temporarily increase physical and combat stats. Once the skill was activated, it would immediately consume all available magic until the enemy in front of it was defeated. It required 7 units of magic to activate. Once activated, the skill continued to consume 1 unit every 10 seconds. Her maximum magic reserve was 10 units, meaning she could only use the skill for 40 seconds at a time. Mappy added that if her ally's magic didn't run out, Rinka's skill wouldn't be interrupted. Rent confirmed that this is now possible thanks to the Magic Borrow ability and the new Autocompensation feature. Rinka, thoughtfully, said that with the help of such conditions, she would really be able to fight as she dreamed. She pointed to the approaching Goblin Forge. Mappy, watching the enemies, enthusiastically declared that they had noticed them, and that was wonderful. Rent, without wasting a second, said that he would try to transfer some of his magic to her. Rinka looked at him in surprise, but Rent confidently promised that everything would work out, and asked her to believe not only in him, but in herself as well. Rinka, gathering her courage, nodded. She concentrated and firmly said that from the first blow to the last, her sword would cut and destroy. This was her way, the way of Assura. Rent, observing the state of his magic, activated the Autocompensation ability as its volume dropped below 9 units. The magic borrowing function was immediately activated. At this moment, Rinka had already entered the battle. In his mind, Rent couldn't help but be surprised. Her true strength, her hidden and previously untapped combat potential, was probably beginning to manifest before him. Goblins from above began shooting at them, taking up positions on the hill. But even this did not stop Rinka. With incredible speed, she reached the enemies and destroyed them with a single blow. Rent, looking at her actions, admitted with admiration that Rinka's gift was incredibly powerful. A stream of power literally emanated from her, capable of suppressing everything around her. Mappy added that the only drawback to her abilities was the high consumption of magic. It was no wonder that regular troops were unable to tap into her true potential. However, if you look at her skill from another perspective, using only 1 unit of magic for 10 seconds seemed like a blessing. She guessed that in the future, the skill would probably become more powerful and require even more energy. Rent, after deep thought, came to the conclusion that the issue was not so much in the technical improvement of the skill, but in Rinka herself. It was she who was the key to unlocking this power. A few moments later, the fight was over. Rinka had destroyed all her opponents. Rent, not hiding his delight, exclaimed that she had done an amazing job. Mappy suddenly noticed the magic stones scattered around. Rent was amazed to see that in just a couple of minutes, Rinka had completely cleared the entire area of goblins. But the next second, something unexpected happened. Rinka, in a state of exhaustion, suddenly attacked Rent himself. He barely managed to parry her blows with his dagger. A moment later, she came to and, exhausted, fell right on top of him, admitting that she was incredibly tired. Never before had her skill lasted so long. Rent, being so close, hesitated and muttered quietly that she had come too close. Rinka, realizing this, immediately apologized. Mappy, cheerfully, noted that they looked like a real couple and the whole scene was cute. Rent, waving her hand in displeasure, told her not to talk nonsense. Later, in the guild, the employee announced the results. The number of magic stones collected from the goblins was 1043, which meant a total of 104,300 gold. The The stones of the goblin chieftain were taken into account separately, 18 pieces worth 9,000 gold. At that moment, the adventurers, recognizing Rent, approached them and expressed their displeasure. Rent calmly noted that this time, all the credit belonged to Rinka. The guild member continued and announced that the goblin seeds they had obtained from destroying the colony amounted to 18 units, which earned them another 36,000 gold. She handed them the reward. Rinka, checking her inner feelings, was surprised that just today her maximum amount of magic had increased by 4 units at once. Rent warmly congratulated her on this achievement. Rinka added that in the 3 previous years, she had only managed to add 2 units, and now she had achieved such progress in just 1 day. And all this was possible only thanks to Rent. With deep gratitude, she thanked him. Rent modestly replied that he had only helped a little, and that she had done all the real work herself. Rinka continued and admitted that she still could not believe what happened today. Rent said with confidence that he had seen it all, and confirmed that she was magnificent. He advised her to be proud of herself. Mappy politely interjected, apologizing for the interruption and reporting the magical debt accumulated for the day. She explained that 1 hour and 21 minutes had passed since Rinka's skill had been activated. During this time, 126 units of one's own magic were expended, and an additional 490 units of borrowed magic. The total was 616 units. Rinka, having heard this, calmly said that from now on she intended to become stronger and would definitely repay the debt. Mappy added that this entire loan was charged at only 10%, and there was no repayment period. Rinka nodded reservedly, agreeing to the terms. Rent was wondering when was the last time someone had truly thanked him for his help. Voices floated into his head, Guy shouting that his skills had reached a new level, and Misa thanking Rent for everything. And then Rent firmly decided for himself that from that moment on he would not make any more mistakes. He promised that now they would become strong together. Mappy called out to him, calling him Sir. Rinka, inspired by the results, suggested celebrating the creation of their squad with a delicious dinner. Rent asked her with a smile what she would like. Rinka thought about it and said that she would probably choose meat. Rent supported the choice, saying that it was a great option. On the 8th level of the Great Melba Labyrinth, in an area known as Dragon Mountain, the party members were busy completing a mission. Jin had a hard time peeling the scales off the dragon's body and noted with displeasure that they were extremely durable, and removing them was much more difficult than killing the dragon itself. Fugue, checking the assignment, reminded them that according to the conditions, they had to collect exactly 30 of these scales. Hearing this, Jin exclaimed in annoyance. He had never imagined that collecting scales would be more tiring than the battle itself. He then made a sharp remark to his comrades, demanding that they also participate. Nymeria said without enthusiasm that this hard work should be done by men. Comet indignantly shouted that he was not a gopher. Jin responded with irritation that their female companions had 2 impudent faces. At that moment, Roger appeared on the battlefield. Jin immediately turned to him, surprised by his sudden appearance, and asking where he had been. Roger silently handed him the dragon's liver. Jin, seeing the organ, realized with horror where it had come from, and anxiously asked if it had really been inside the dragon. Roger, still cheerful, laughed and said that he had almost dissolved in the monster's gastric juice. The genie shouted furiously that he had asked him 100 times not to do anything so reckless. Roger apologized contritely. Suddenly, everything changed dramatically. The parasitic creatures that were previously inside the dragon burst out and wrapped themselves around Nymeria and Comet. Roger exclaimed in shock, realizing that one of the parasites must have been inside the dragon's body. Nymeria, wrapped in tentacles, screamed, begging them to do something. Jean, instead of helping, calmly asked her not to make strange sounds. Meanwhile, at the guild building, Rinka exclaimed in surprise when she heard that Rent was planning to have dinner with the Meteor Shower members. Rent calmly explained that Roger had invited him a few days ago, and he thought it would be a good idea to invite her as well. Rinka shyly refused, saying that she was only an F-rank adventurer and had no right to be among such distinguished people. Rent tried to convince her not to belittle herself. But Rinka stopped abruptly and asked whether Rent was really personally acquainted with this legendary detachment. Rent confirmed with a slight nod that they had met Meteor Shower, especially after his previous unit had started to attract attention. They had even shared a few drinks. Rinka, after hearing all this, wished him a pleasant evening. At this time, Jean, preparing for the meeting with Rent, reflected that it had been a long time since he had drunk with Roger. He felt a slight excitement, anticipating the meeting, but inside something was troubling him. As Rent stood waiting, Nymeria suddenly came up behind him and whispered words of apology with a smile for being late. Rent turned around, taken aback by her appearance. He reminded her that they were supposed to be on a mission. Nymeria replied that since they were having a drink together, she decided to dress up and asked him how he liked her new outfit. Rent, speechless, managed to squeeze out that she looked very beautiful. Nymeria looked into his eyes with interest and noticed that he blushed. As always, he was so cute. Roger, noticing the scene, jumped up and lightly hit Nymeria, ordering her to let go of Rent. He complained that the outfit looked stupid and asked when she had even managed to change. Nymeria complained that she was in pain and called Roger stupid, asking Rent to say that he liked it. Roger, distracted, ordered another ale for himself. Nymeria joined him, adding that she could use a drink too. Rent watched the scene and thought how quickly things were moving. Roger, noticing his confusion, asked if anything was wrong. Rent replied that everything was fine. In his mind, he added that if he kept up with those two, he would definitely die of a hangover in the morning. Roger at one point became serious and told Rent that he had heard many rumors about his current squad. He also added that he had heard that Rent had been expelled. Rent, hearing this, did not respond. He simply remained silent. Roger admitted with genuine regret that he was sorry to hear Rent's story. He suggested that they not dwell on the past, get a drink, and try to forget all the bad things. Rent calmly declined, explaining that now was not the best time for fun and alcohol. Nymeria, hearing about what had happened, sympathetically said that such an act was terrible, because to kick out an old comrade after 5 years of adventures together is cruel. Roger added with irritation that Rent's former comrades behaved like complete idiots. Lately, there were only rumors about them, full of failures and setbacks. He stated with confidence that everything was based solely on Renta, because he was the one who had the ability to store magical energy. In his opinion, they simply forgot what hopes were placed on Renta. Nymeria remembered that their previous squad was indeed the one that reached B rank the fastest. Roger nodded, adding that it was no surprise. That whole team had always been full of self-absorbed narcissists. Rent looked down and admitted that, thinking about it now, he had come to the conclusion that he himself had perhaps clung to them for too long. All he did in their adventures together was simply give them his magic. He never thought about making his own way and finding his own power. Rent felt that the expulsion was deserved, because he really was pathetic then. Roger, watching him, noted that Rent had become much more mature. Rent, slightly surprised, asked if he really had imagined it that way. Nymeria intervened and jokingly remarked that their own leader had always been a big child compared to Rent. Roger flared up in response, asking if she had just said that about him. Nymeria smiled and explained that it all started with their battle against the dragon. Rent was surprised and said that the dragon only appeared on the 8th level of the Great Labyrinth. Roger confirmed that this was where they had been messing around a bit today. Rent exclaimed with admiration that it was cool, because only strong dragons lived there. Roger agreed, explaining that these lizards did sometimes cause serious problems. Nymeria added that something else happened after they defeated the dragon. Roger rolled his eyes and asked her to stop embarrassing him for a few seconds. Nymeria laughed and said that when they were gathering materials, Roger made a big mess. It was because of him that parasites started crawling out of the dragon's body. At this time, Rent, watching the two of them, thought to himself. He knew that Roger and Nymeria were among those people whose greatness he himself seemed unable to reach. But for all that, they spoke to him as an equal. He thought that he sincerely wanted to become an adventurer like them. Roger suddenly announced that next time they were going to go through the entire 8th level. Rent listened with interest. Roger continued and said that their goal was to conquer the Great Labyrinth of Melba and reach its deepest level. Rent's inner voice came alive. He thought that the deepest level was the point to which all true adventurers aspired. Roger turned and, looking ahead, said that no one knew exactly how many levels there were in the Great Labyrinth. Nymeria, with excitement in her voice, suggested that they get to the bottom themselves. Rent, fired up by the idea, nodded confidently, and said that he too had news to share. Roger became interested and suggested that Rent had created a new squad. Rent confirmed, telling him that he had teamed up with Rinka, the same girl who had once been abandoned by her partners. Roger remembered her and exclaimed that she was the same girl. Rent explained that Rinka, like him, had a unique gift, and it was this that caused her to be rejected by her former comrades. Roger clarified that they were now called Double Deflection. Nymeria noted that the name sounded very good. Roger added with a slight grin that since a new squad had appeared, it meant that they were now rivals. Later, as they parted, Rent thanked Roger for the treat. Roger nodded and suggested that they work together from now on. Nymeria looked at Rent and quietly reminded him that he still hadn't told him the main thing. Roger, standing thoughtfully, looked away and said that the one he was addressing was acting stupidly. After all, she had heard that Rent had created a new squad. He said it with a hint of irritation, as if he wanted to say, "Join them, don't hesitate." But then he fell silent, realizing that he didn't know how exactly to say it out loud. Nymeria, looking at him a little sadly, agreed that there was some truth in his words. Roger, sighing heavily, began to remember from the past. He said that once upon a time he had a drinking buddy, a man who earned his living by usury. This man trusted no one but himself. Despite this, he made a huge fortune, but at the same time, he made many enemies. People hated him everywhere. In the end, someone decided to do away with him, and he was killed. Roger noted with concern that Rent's gift was much like that man's. Depending on the situation, there would always be someone who wanted more from him than they were entitled to. If Rent trusted the wrong person, he could easily make a fatal mistake. Roger admitted that this was what he had feared most of all, that something like this would happen one day. But when he looked at Rent, he realized that he was okay now. He wanted to continue the conversation and turned to Nymeria, reminding her that she was there too. However, turning around, he realized that she had already disappeared. Meanwhile, Nymeria approached Rent with a cheerful tone and suggested that they have another drink together sometime. Rent politely declined, explaining that Rinka was waiting for him at the hotel and he did not want to wake her if he returned too late. Nymeria said with a sly smile that this meant he was now infatuated with this girl. Rent, visibly blushing, began to justify himself, saying that Rinka was just his friend, nothing more. Nymeria hinted coquettishly that maybe he wanted to have some fun with her, hoping for a double entendre. At that point, Roger snapped and slapped her on the back, demanding that she calm down. He asked her not to play with Rent's feelings and not to force him into an unhealthy relationship. Nymeria, her shoulders hunched and her smile contrite, mumbled an apology. She explained that she just wanted to invite Rent to hang out and have some fun. Rent suddenly remembered something that had completely slipped his mind. He raised his head sharply and said that he had one request for them. Mappy, who was watching the carriage from the side, noted to herself, as expected, that they had been in this place for the 3rd week already. During this time, she accumulated complete information about debtors, and the Central Information Bureau worked flawlessly. In the guild building, Rinka enthusiastically ate the local roast on a spit, delightedly noting that the dish was incredibly delicious. It was the guild's signature dish, which included finely chopped meat wrapped in a crispy batter. Mappy confirmed that according to rumors, this particular dish was considered a special delicacy in the guilds of this city. She also liked it very much. Rinka continued to eat with appetite, admitting that after using her abilities, she felt acute hunger and always wanted to eat well. Rent smiled and noted that a growing organism must consume a lot of food. He also added that Mappy also ate in large quantities. Mappy at this point reminded Rinka that she wanted to tell Rent something important. Rinka quickly remembered and, a little embarrassed, said that today she managed to raise her rank from F to E. Rent approvingly noted that this achievement was magnificent, especially considering that she had achieved it in only 4 days. Rinka proudly added that her magical energy had increased to 24 units. She admitted that she had been angry about her gift for a long time and considered it a curse, but now she was sure that she could become a real adventurer. According to her, all this became possible only thanks to Rent. Rent, hearing this, admitted that not long ago he himself had treated his gift in the same way. Mappy, looking at them with a kind smile, said that she had prepared a gift for them, a kind of treat. Rent was surprised and asked what it was. Mappy explained that they were talking about food and offered them to try a special part of the dish. She assured them that the most delicious part of it was the crispy crust, not the filling. Rinka asked with interest whether this was really true. Mappy continued that the main part is just a prelude to the magnificent crunch. Rinka tried it and enthusiastically said that it was incredibly delicious. However, the next moment, Guy entered the room and kicked the table with all his might, knocking it over. Rinka screamed in confusion, not understanding what was happening. Guy, looking at Rent, said that he hadn't seen him for a long time. Rent calmly asked him what he wanted, reminding him that their paths had long since diverged. Guy angrily grabbed Rent by the clothes and demanded that he stop playing dumb. Misa, who was standing nearby, stated with an accusing voice that ever since Rent started stealing their magic, everything in their squad had gone downhill. She blamed him for the destruction of their team. Rent replied with cold confidence that stealing was too strong a word, since they had started it in the first place. Guy did not understand where this was leading. Rent explained that he hadn't given them magic, he'd lent it to them, and they'd never volunteered to give it back, so he'd had to force them to do it. Guy, seething with anger, cursed. Misa looked at Rinka and mockingly asked who she was. Rinka calmly introduced herself as an adventurer working with Rent. Misa asked again in surprise, were they really on the same team? Guy, looking at her with a sneer, said that it was unlikely that anyone would form a squad with Rent. According to him, Rent was the last person who should think about teamwork. Elle, standing next to her, mockingly said that it all looked very cute. Rinka firmly stated that Rent was a wonderful companion. Misa, hearing this, grabbed Rinka by the throat in irritation and demanded that she stop looking into her eyes. Rent stood up abruptly and ordered her to stop. Guy looked at him defiantly and asked if he really wanted to try his hand too. At that moment, Roger appeared. He calmly addressed them, suggesting that if they were going to fight, they should go outside. Guy, stunned, recognized him and cried out in disbelief. Roger, looking at the overturned table, shook his head in amazement and said that it was all a waste of food. Guy, justifying himself, shouted that this idiot Rent was tormenting them with his strange spells. Roger asked what exactly he meant by spells. Misa added, with hatred in her voice, that Rent was stealing their magic. Ella, raising her voice, accused him of trying to get revenge for being expelled from their squad. Roger, looking on with restraint, expressed doubts about the sincerity of the accusations brought against Rent. He recalled that on previous journeys his former companions had borrowed magic, which obliged them to return what they had borrowed. Guy, feeling the pressure, muttered uncertainly that perhaps there was some truth to it. Misa, with heightened emotion, replied that Rent had done it without their permission. Roger, with a slight chuckle, noted that such accusations sounded unconvincing. Rain intervened and supported Roger, arguing that the accusers were being overly aggressive. Roger, having come to the conclusion that it was pointless to argue verbally, proposed a solution to hold a duel in order to finally dot all the I's. Misa took this with unexpected enthusiasm, repeating the offer as a challenge. Roger said that since he was free now, he could act as a second. Guy, hearing this, was surprised and clarified that Roger would indeed be present. Rinka, not quite understanding, asked again what all this meant. Rent calmly explained that it was about a ritual where a dispute is resolved in a fight between two people. Guy turned to Rent with glee and said that if he won the duel, Rent would have to compensate them for all the magic power they thought he had stolen. Rent agreed, without hesitation. He didn't care if there were 3 of them against him. Guy exclaimed in shock, not believing that he was willing to fight alone. A little earlier, before all these events, Roger asked Rent a direct question, what exactly he wanted from him. Rent asked Roger to act as his second in his duel the following day. He explained that the opponents would be members of his old troupe. Roger was surprised and asked if Rent really intended to fight alone against everyone. Rent confirmed this, adding that Guy and the others would arrive in Melba before dawn. They would find him and try to sort things out their way. It was at this point, as expected, that the topic of a duel would arise. He also noted that his old comrades would not listen to him alone, but if Roger intervened, their attitude might change. Roger was interested, but wondered why Rent was so sure that everything would happen tomorrow. Rent hesitated a little and said that he just felt it. Present. The voice in charge of the ceremony announced that the duelists were ready. He said that Roger would be a witness and a second, and added that the show promised to be exciting. Misa was surprised to see how many onlookers had gathered around. Guy was delighted that the stage for the fight was perfect and promised to show the audience everything they were capable of. Rent, watching the proceedings, thought to himself that Roger knew how to put on a show and attract the attention of the public. A genie from the crowd shouted out good luck to Rent and admitted that he had bet all his money for the week on him. He demanded that he not let him down. There was some chatter from the crowd. The odds were 3-1, and someone was taking a chance. Rent shook his head, noting again that Jean was getting into gambling. The guild member stood up and formally asked the parties to announce their bets. Guy spoke first on behalf of the party. He stated that if they win, Rent must immediately stop collecting their magic power. The guild member then turned to Rent. Rent calmly said that if he won, he would increase the interest rate on the magic he was collecting. Guy, not immediately understanding, asked again, "What rate?" Rent explained that the current rate was 8% for 10 days. If he won, he intended to increase it to 10%. At the same time, the credit for magical power will be closed monthly, and starting from tomorrow, he will begin to receive an additional 90,000 units of magical energy. The audience began to whisper, not understanding the meaning of such strange conversations, guessing that it was somehow connected with magic. Rent added that the 10% rate would be accrued regularly. Misa, hearing this, interrupted in panic and exclaimed, "Was it really the percentages that were the reason why their magic was disappearing?" Rent confirmed that he collected interest on the debt daily. It was his collection, mandatory payments. Guy, losing his temper, yelled at him to stop talking. He promised that today was Rent's last day. The guild member, having made sure there were no objections, asked both parties to swear an oath. Guy was the first to swear obedience. Rent nodded and confirmed his willingness to accept the outcome of this sacred duel. Roger, as Meteor Shower's second, acted as an official witness. Nymeria approached Rinka, noticing her nervousness, and asked if this was the first time she had seen something like this. She explained that the oath taken in the duel was not just a promise. Breaking it entailed grave consequences. Nymeria also asked if she was the same Rinka from Renta's squad. Rinka confirmed it with surprise. Then, a little embarrassed, she called Nymeria Meteor Shower's sexy little sister. Nymeria smiled and introduced herself, adding that she had spent the evening with Rent the previous evening. Rinka flushed and said that she had heard them having a drink together. Nymeria, still teasing, smiled and hinted that the evening had been delightful. Rinka nervously exclaimed that they were just drinking, nothing more. Nymeria laughed and admitted that she was just joking. She assured them that Rent was not the type to do such a thing, and advised them to trust him. According to her, he would definitely win. Rinka confidently agreed. At that moment, Mappy added that she also had something to say, and that was that Mr. Rent would never lose. Rinka repeated after her, thoughtfully pronouncing the word never. Roger turned to the duelists and loudly announced that the duel was beginning. In the guild arena, Guy and Misa grabbed bottles of potion, gulping down handfuls of restorative elixirs. The crowd watching the start of the duel looked at each other in surprise and discussed why they were drinking right during the fight, because the duel had just started. It seemed they were trying to restore their strength with magic faster than time. Elle, holding out her hand and curling her lips, declared that if they defeated the idiot, she was ready to endure. Rent, watching them, sighed and emphasized that he would wait until they finished drinking. He didn't care about delays, and he was in no hurry. Guy got angry and shouted back at the taunt, calling him a bastard for mocking him. Rent thought in his mind that they were still relying on magic and potions after all. Of course, they were the ones who had forced him to take recovery potions in the first place. In the past, Rent calmly proceeded to explain that he had already run out of magical energy. Misa then forced him to drink a potion and told him that he should take it and recover, and then give them his magical power when it returned. Rent thought back to how sick he felt from the pressure, and how hard it all was. He even felt like vomiting, but he kept going. Inside him, the words about how they were real bastards were spinning. The crowd screamed, reminding them that the duel had already begun and they could not stand still. Suddenly, an explosive blow was heard. Guy thrust his sword into the air, attacking first. Rinka screamed at Rent when he stumbled. She was worried about him. The crowd watching the scene screamed, and someone jokingly said that he would return everything with interest. A genie from the crowd exclaimed in bewilderment that this was serious. Guy announced that he had finished Ren off with one blow, which left everyone speechless. Misa gasped in shock that such behavior was too serious for a disabled person. Guy proudly admitted that Elle's support magic had worked perfectly. Elle, delighted, repeated that she had been great. Guy, waving his arms, exclaimed that they had overdone it a little, and asked Roger, who was standing and watching, smiling. Misa shouted at Guy to turn around. Guy turned around in confusion. Misa used a magic shield. Guy clarified that he had just seen a fireball aimed at him. Comet shouted in confusion, demanding to know who dared to interfere in the duel when Roger was present. He called the culprits idiots, only making the situation worse. Gaius, confused, asked who did it. At that moment, a shadow entered the arena. Rent stood up again. Misa was surprised to see that he was still alive and used a fire tornado against Arnett. Rent immediately attacked Misa with a new spell. Guy shouted for Elle to get her to her feet quickly. Rent said coldly, "Triple fireball." The audience sat with their mouths almost open. Could it really be 3 spells in a row? They discussed whether it was a higher level of magic, since a regular fireball was launched so many times. Comet cried out that Rent seemed to have used magic without stopping, and added that he couldn't have done it like that either. Guy, in shock, said he didn't understand how Rent had done it. His inner voice, caught in an internal struggle, hesitated. He couldn't describe the shock of Rent being unharmed, of what had happened, of the fact that he hadn't suffered any damage. Rinka, noticing this, exclaimed that Rent was amazing, and that thanks to the power of the infinite magic vault, he remained unharmed. Mappy corrected her. This is not a passive skill at all, but the result of hard, painstaking work. A little earlier, Rent had said over the potion that he had finally accumulated 150,000 megapixels, magical energy, and was ready to purchase the skill Creditor's Defense. The system voice announced that the skill purchase was complete, and that the skill was now always active. Rent thought that, thanks to him, the outcome of tomorrow's duel was a foregone conclusion. He knew that it took a lot of time, but the skill would really come in handy in the future. Even if the debtor gets angry and attacks, he will be able to defend himself. The skill's effect nullifies the debtor's attacks up to a certain level of damage, and the amount of damage nullified is proportional to the debtor's debts. Back to the present moment, Guy used a vacuum strike. The fire circle from the impact slowly melted into thin air. Rent calmly muttered that the sword, despite being made of mithril, had fallen apart. Guy didn't seem to care much about his weapon. Mappy added that such impudence is not just a mistake by Guy, but a reason to demand millions, because they are obliged. She said that they will not be able to even scratch Rent. Rent dryly noted that they were doing everything to restore their strength, and apparently they simply didn't have enough money for a repair potion. He quickly broke Gaius's sword. The crowd screamed with delight. The blade actually fell apart. Fugue, grabbing the broken blade, quietly thought about selling this metal. Guy screamed, insisting that he had no intention of losing to Rent. But Rent, without ceremony, sent another wave of magic at Guy. The crowd once again shouted that the winner was in sight, and once again admitted that this guy was really cool. Rent approached Guy and calmly told him to hand over his magic. Guy weakly admitted that he had used it all up on his skills. Rent almost kicked Guy, declaring that this was what reality meant. And since it had come to this point, he kept 3 fresh souls with him, not knowing exactly how much they were worth, but perhaps their value was enough to cover the debt. Guy, exhausted, tried to say something else, but Rent cut him off, saying that if this really happened, his soul would forever leave the circle of reincarnation and wander in the cold void. However, he added, it was none of his business. Guy lay there, exhausted, and with difficulty whispered barely audible, long-forgotten words, desperately trying to understand what was happening, and to realize who the man he knew as Rent really was. Rent carefully dropped the coin into the piggy bank, continuing to accumulate his fortune. He smugly said with a sly grin that he had already saved up enough funds. However, despite the amount he had achieved, he did not feel at all satisfied with what he had achieved. He looked enviously at the others and noted that they had absolutely everything one could wish for. Meanwhile, his former squad, in full force, sat in a circle and was busy counting the coins they had. At this point, Rent loudly and demandingly demanded that they give him everything, including every coin. He declared that all their property now belonged exclusively to him and no one else. Suddenly, a voice called his name. softly but insistently, as if from afar. Under the influence of this voice, Rent suddenly returned to the present, emerging from his thoughts or memories. Rinka, full of anxiety and excitement, quickly approached him and hugged him tightly. She confidently said that everything was fine now and he had won. With a trembling voice, she asked him to calm down and come to his senses. Roger officially declared the duel over, with Rent emerging victorious. He praised him for his skill and strength with genuine admiration. Roger thought the fight was magnificent and impressive. He admitted that he expected more cunning and subtle tactics from Rent. However, he admitted that this method was quite effective. He noted that Rent was extremely ruthless in his actions and left no chance for his opponents. Maria, in turn, noted with slight irony that Rent's actions even sent shivers down her spine. Rent tried to comprehend what had happened, looking clearly confused and perplexed. He muttered that he did not understand what had really happened. Then he admitted that he could not remember anything, as if his memory had completely shut down. Roger, hearing his words, asked again if he really had lost his memory. The spectators who watched the fight reacted violently to what they saw. They shouted loudly that the fight was really cool and spectacular. According to their description, Rent at that moment looked like a real demon, frightening everyone with his appearance. They were especially amazed at how, at the end of the battle, a huge wave of fireballs incinerated the opponents in an instant, as if by magic. Rent wondered with genuine surprise if he had really caused all this. Roger hastened to reassure him, saying that there was no cause for alarm. He assured that all participants had survived and were still alive. Roger added that specially appointed representatives of the guild would take care of the victims. Amelia decided to reproach Roger for being too cruel. She said that the fight could have ended a little earlier. According to her, what was happening brought Rinka to tears. She was so scared. Roger calmly explained his position, emphasizing that he especially hated those scoundrels who committed terrible acts against those whom they themselves had betrayed. He expressed confidence that they got exactly what they deserved. Roger suggested that the reason for Rent's memory loss was due to his extreme anger. Most likely, during the fight, he became so angry that he completely lost control of himself. Rent acknowledged that this may have been the case. Comet suddenly rushed towards him. She joyfully and loudly pronounced his name to attract his attention. Rent was surprised by her appearance and did not immediately believe his eyes. Comet, with admiration in her voice, asked him to teach her how to use fireball magic like him. She admitted that she had never seen anything like it before. Rent began to explain hesitantly that such spells were only possible thanks to his special gift. But Comet rudely interrupted him in mid-sentence. She shouted that nothing was impossible for her, and she was ready to do anything for the sake of knowledge. Roger intervened to cool her ardor a little. He asked her not to press Rent, as he had enough problems as it was. Meanwhile, the women poured some liquid onto the body of Guy and his squad, which caused him a sharp pain. He screamed loudly, complaining of severe pain. The woman explained that it was a potion for healing wounds. She added that it was cheap and contained a lot of impurities, but she didn't have any other. Guy, despite the pain, tried to be ironic. He said that as a wounded person he should be treated with more caution. The woman responded with irritation that he was a real pain in the ass. She said that was why they were being saved on, because they deserved it. At that moment, Rent approached them, and his sudden appearance frightened Elia. He recalled that he had won the duel. Based on the previously concluded agreement, he announced an increase in the rate to 10%. Guy was indignant and did not believe what he heard. He said sarcastically that he did not understand why they should pay him more than they had already spent. Suddenly, they all felt a sharp pain, as if an invisible force had pierced their bodies. The guild employee calmly but sternly reminded that the oath given during the duel was unbreakable and binding. Roger added that failure to comply with the terms would not only threaten something abstract, but their very lives. Guy gave in to this pressure. He quietly but clearly said that he understood everything and would not resist anymore. Rent has officially announced the extension of their contract. He recalled that he had already warned about this before the duel began. Rent explained that tomorrow would be the 7th month. According to the terms, he would be able to collect the 90,000 units he had previously owed Guy. However, this amount would not be enough to complete all the payments. He pointed out that under the new contract, they had 10 days to repay the entire amount of 153,139 units, including interest. Even if the 3 participants restore their magical powers with the bracelets, they will still have to collect an additional 38,000. Guy was shocked and screamed loudly in amazement when he heard this number. Rent firmly ordered everyone to start drinking potions or using any other means that would help restore the loss of strength and magic. Elle asked doubtfully, saying with despair that they had almost no money left and no way to replenish the losses. Guy indignantly shouted and expressed indignation at what Rent said. Rent calmly but sternly calculated that they would have to drink approximately 77 bottles. He expressed confidence that they could afford it, despite their financial difficulties. Guy replied with irritation that potions don't grow on trees, as if to emphasize the absurdity of the proposal. Misa, worried about the situation, said that if they fail to pay off the debt, the consequences could be extremely dire. Rent calmly declared that then their fate would be sealed and the end inevitable. He stressed that he does not intend to give advice to those who have already found themselves in the position of debtors. According to him, they could not even harm him, their creditor, due to the unique skills he possessed. Guy, finally understanding what was happening, realized why his attacks did not cause the slightest reaction or fear in Rent. Rent concluded by stating that they would have to do everything possible to pay off his debts over the next 10 days. Guy, embittered but dejected, declared that this was not the end of it. Later, when the tension had subsided, Roger's team and Rent himself began to celebrate their victory. Jean happily reported that thanks to Rent's actions, he became a rich man and expressed his gratitude to him. Rent reluctantly thanked him in return, but wondered what Jean would do to him if he lost. Sinistra approached him and congratulated him on his victory. Rent, noticing her, called out their nickname, the Two-Headed Silver Wolf. Sinistra replied with a smile that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Rent expressed surprise that they found themselves in Melba. Destra clarified that they had arrived in this city because they were on a mission. Sinistra added that they even rode in the same carriage with the duelists that Rent was fighting. Rent noted with mild surprise that it was indeed a strange coincidence. Destra said that these duelists were as rude as the rumors said. Sinistra shared that he had never seen B-rank adventurers fight so poorly against orcs before, and this left her unpleasantly surprised. Sarika, interested, asked if he had actually defeated them, and expressed regret that she had not been able to see it. Shannon echoed her sentiments, adding that she wouldn't mind watching that fight either. Rent thought to himself at that moment that they all hated Guy's squad too much. Jean, back in the fun, called out to Rent and said that he was now the star of the show, and they were expecting him to give a victory speech. Rent, a little confused, coughed, and then began to say that he had been expelled from his former unit. He admitted that he was in despair and thought that everything in his life was already over. But then he added that fate had unexpectedly given him new loyal friends. He said that thanks to this he was able to start all over again as an adventurer, and at the end of his speech he expressed hope for support and understanding from those present. The audience in the hall responded enthusiastically to his words. They shouted that it was a great speech and advised him not to be afraid of those who had wronged him. They expressed the hope that they could become friends with him. Roger, watching the proceedings, remarked with a smile that Rent was indeed quite funny. Comet loudly and enthusiastically asked him again to teach her magic. Fuga asked her to be quieter so as not to create unnecessary noise. Nymeria said with a slight mockery that such an impulse was quite in Rent's spirit. Later, Rent approached his comrades and thanked them for everything. Mappy proudly stated that she was confident of his victory from the very beginning. Rinka, who was standing nearby, happily agreed. Mappy, continuing to express her opinion, suggested that the loser's pride must have burst from shame, since the defeat happened right before the eyes of the entire guild. Rent replied that he hoped so. Rinka looked at him and said that he was great. However, she admitted that at some point she felt afraid. Rent apologized for making her worry. Rinka, remembering one important moment, started talking about how he once said that he had lost his memory. Rent confirmed her words, explaining that Roger then assumed that he was so angry that he lost his mind. But now that he thought back on it, he felt like things were a little different. Rent said it wasn't rage that overwhelmed him at the time, but something else entirely. It was an emotion he couldn't quite put his finger on. He added that it was as if another personality had awakened within him, filled with malice and darkness. Rinka asked anxiously if it was really malice as he described. Rinka fought a fierce battle with the demons, demonstrating her strength and skills. Rent, observing her actions, noted that she fought well. Rinka, without losing her momentum, said that the battle was not over yet, because she had become stronger than before. Suddenly, a terrifying four-armed skeleton appeared, wounded her, and the next second broke her sword. However, everything that happened turned out to be just a dream. After waking up, Mappy anxiously asked Rent what had happened to him. He, as if returning to reality, quietly said that he had just remembered something. Mappy asked if this was the same fit of rage that had once overtaken him. Rent confirmed it, adding that he also remembered the moment when Rinka had destroyed an entire horde of goblins in her rage. He noted that she had fought in that battle, almost losing her mind. He wondered if perhaps their unique abilities could be very dangerous, especially if they got out of control. Mappy, trying to cheer him up, said that it all depended on how exactly these powers were used. She reminded him that he was not alone, because she would always be there. In her opinion, he looked scared, even if he denied it. Rent tried to brush it off, claiming that he wasn't afraid at all. Mappy, looking at him incredulously, said that he still looked very scared. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. Rinka, standing behind the door, apologized for the late visit. She admitted that she has nightmares every night that are hard to get rid of. She added with gratitude that thanks to Rentu, she feels herself getting stronger every day. But despite this, she still cannot forget the moment when the skeleton broke her sword. This image is deeply etched in her memory. Rent responded by saying that today, in his own way, he had dealt with his fears about the past. He had realized something important from observing the behavior of his former comrades. Rent realized that they clearly weren't trying to get their magic back. So he came to the conclusion that in 10 days everything would come to an end. Now it was time to help Rinka cope with her fear. He expressed confidence that she would definitely defeat that very skeleton. In the morning, one girl remarked with admiration that the flower beds in this place were very beautiful. Rinka, who was nearby, briefly agreed. The girl said that Melba is a city where people from all over the world come. She added that you can buy seeds of all existing flower species here. Rinka, studying the plants, read the names aloud. Grimolata and Melba's Morning Glory. She noticed that one flower bloomed in the morning, and the other only in the evening. For this reason, the flower beds in the city were divided according to the time of day when the flowers began to bloom. The girl was surprised and delighted, calling her sister. She asked where she got such knowledge and how she understood it. At that moment, Rent appeared. He apologized for keeping them waiting, explaining that it had taken him a long time to get fully equipped. Mappy proudly began to list the cost of his equipment. The armor cost 300,000 gold, the sleeveless coat cost 150,000, and the traveling boots cost 35,000. Rent casually asked Rinka if she needed new armor. Mappy summed up, saying that the total amount was 485,000 gold. Rinka admitted that she had already tried many options, but the current armor turned out to be the most comfortable for her. Rent understood her choice. A little girl approached them and asked Rinka if she was looking for armor. When Rinka confirmed that she was, the girl turned her attention to her katana. She excitedly noticed that she had a katana and asked if she was a samurai. Convinced that this was true, she invited Rinka to visit their family store, where she could find products that would be perfect for her. Rent tried to stop their conversation. The girl standing next to her commented that Suzu was, as always, too active. They headed to Yagyu's shop. Rent, after looking at the assortment, said with amazement that he had never seen anything like it before. Suzu greeted the new customers with joy and warmly welcomed them to Yagyu's shop, which specialized in goods related to the cultures of the Far East. Rent noted with interest that it was the first time he had seen anything related to that region and was clearly intrigued. Suzu invited Rinka to examine the unusual helmet and told her that it had once been worn by the shogun himself, the greatest and highest ranking of all samurai. Rinka tried the helmet on cautiously, but honestly admitted that it seemed a little heavy to her. During the inspection, she accidentally touched one of the items and damaged it. Suzu screamed in horror that it was her tanuki. Rinka apologized immediately, making her apology sincere. However, Suzu immediately encouraged her, saying that they had another one exactly like it, and there was no reason to worry. Rent thought to himself at that moment that the presence of a spare copy was very suspicious and unexpected. Suzu quickly showed off another item, a strange device that, when used in combat, could make an enemy lose the will to continue fighting. Rent looked at it with disbelief and noted that it was rather strange. Suzu immediately suggested something even more eccentric, special dumplings that, when eaten, would put the enemy under control. Rent reacted with disgust, finding the idea creepy. The thought flashed through his head that this place was literally permeated with some kind of mysterious and dangerous aura. Rent, not wishing to linger any longer, expressed his gratitude for the hospitality but made it clear that it was time for them to leave. Suzu, without losing her grip, declared that she would not let them go without a purchase. She showed the mask and said that if you put it on, then at any celebration the one who will be wearing it will become the best dancer. Rent called for Rinka to leave, but she suddenly stopped and froze, looking at something. A beautiful kimono caught her attention. A man standing nearby explained that what lay before them was a habute kimono, hand-dyed using a special dye that contained real blood. He explained that although the fabric was thin, when magic passed through it, it turned into strong armor. He greeted them politely, and noted that there had been no customers in the store for a long time. Suzu proudly stated that it was she who brought them here. The man, irritated by her methods, reproached her for using force again. Rent confirmed that this was indeed true. Suzu, in turn, waved it off and replied that the man was not doing anything at all, so he had nothing to complain about. The man turned to Rinka and noticed that she had a katana. He assumed that she was a samurai. Rinka calmly replied that she was not. Rent asked in confusion who this person was then. The man began to explain that samurai were warriors from a distant eastern land. They fought in close combat, cutting down enemies with katanas, and preferred to wear equipment in the form of a kimono, similar to the one before them. He said that a long time ago he fell in love with the beauty of this culture and brought similar clothes here. Rinka thought about it and said that perhaps the samurai style really did resemble her own fighting style. Rent, looking at her, suggested that the kimono might well suit her in battle. Rinka, hesitantly, expressed interest and asked how much the item cost. She thought it was too expensive. The man thought for a moment and said that the approximate cost of the kimono was 2.5 million. Rinka was stunned. She almost couldn't believe what she heard. Suzu added with annoyance that this was precisely why no one bought their products. The man defended himself by saying that if it had been simple fabrics, he might have lowered the price. However, in this case, things were much more complicated. Suzu responded with irritation that it would be difficult for them to survive if he continued to set such prices. Rinka, feeling guilty, turned to Rent and said that, unfortunately, they could not afford it. Rent, still surprised, asked if the armor was really worth that much. The man confirmed without a shadow of a doubt that it was natural. He said that the fabric this kimono was made of was one of the best that could be found, and he personally guaranteed the quality. Rent, after a short pause, made a decision and announced that he would take it. Rinka couldn't believe her ears. She said his name in surprise. Rent said he had made his decision and wanted Rinka to wear the best armor he could find. He added that it was a small price to pay for such a beautiful thing. Rinka tried to object that the amount was still too large. Rent confidently stated that even if they suddenly needed money again, they could always return to the dungeons and earn it all back. He added that he saw the way she looked at the kimono, and it was a real look of love at first sight. Suzu, appreciating this impulse, said that as a sign of respect, their most respected client receives a mask as a gift. Rent thanked her for her generosity. The man invited Rinka to follow him. Rinka, not knowing what exactly awaited her, followed and asked what they would do. She suggested that perhaps they would need a wooden sword. The man enthusiastically noted that he had not received such orders for a long time and said that he would arrange a sparring match to better understand her movements. This would help him precisely tailor the kimono to her body type and fighting style. Rinka answered briefly that everything was clear. In her mind, she admitted to herself that everything that was happening seemed a little strange to her. Rent at this time asked Suzu how strong her father was. Suzu nodded confidently and said that at least he got real pleasure from such activities. Rent thought about it and noted to himself that Rinka would be fine. Up until now, she had only fought monsters, and fighting a human could be an important experience and a stimulus for growth. The man took a stance and solemnly announced that they were beginning. They started the fight, and the atmosphere immediately became tense. Rent noted with respect that Suzu's father had proven to be a truly strong fighter. Suzu, not to be outdone, noted that her sister had also proven herself to be no worse. The man, holding a wooden sword, urged Rinku not to hold back and show off her true abilities. He noted internally that she was indeed fast, but had not yet reached her full potential. Wanting to push her to her maximum, he increased the pace. Soon Rinka received several accurate blows from him, but did not retreat and continued the fight. They exchanged techniques, and the fight became more and more intense. At some point, the man knocked the wooden sword out of her hands. Rinka was stunned and tried to say something, but words were not enough. The man stopped the fight, apologizing for being too rough. He added that if they had continued in the same spirit, the fight could have turned fatal. Rinka quietly apologized for her carelessness. The man, smiling, replied that there was no need to worry. The fight had been magnificent. He asked her what gift she had. Rinka calmly said that her gift is called the Path of Assura. The man, hearing this, emphasized that this gift was named after a deity. He mentally confirmed his guesses. He then introduced himself formally. He identified himself as the 21st generation Yagyu named Lindau and asked her name. Rinka gave her name. Lindau, after thinking for a moment, said that he wanted to show her a product that he thought would be perfect for her. Rinka thanked him for his efforts and work. When she saw the offered kimono, she noted how beautiful it was. Lindau asked what patterns she preferred. Rinka admitted that she loves floral motifs, but would not like the patterns to be too feminine and delicate. Lindau suggested her a fiery red floral design, which, in the language of flowers, meant courage. Rinka was impressed. Suzu said with admiration that her sister was very strong. She noted that she had never seen her father put such effort into a fight. Rinka admitted that her father looked like a real master of fencing, and suggested that in the past he could have been a real master of the sword. Suzu dispelled this notion and said that fencing was just his hobby. Rinka was amazed. Suzu said that in his youth her father was apprenticed to a kimono maker and trained in the dojo of the warriors who wore his clothes. That's where his skill came from. She also remembered that his gift was fire magic, which he used, for example, to make fires. Rinka said with interest that now everything was clear. Suzu added that there were only 5 years left until her coming-of-age ceremony. She was curious about what gift would be bestowed upon her. She admitted that she would like to receive a gift related to trade. Later, Rent said that everything would be ready the day after tomorrow. Rinka said that she was looking forward to this moment. Rent, after thinking for a moment, brought up the subject of flowers. He noticed that Rinka was particularly keen on fabrics with floral patterns, and often chatted about flower beds with others. Rinka admitted that she dreamed of becoming a florist as a child. There was a wonderful flower shop in her hometown, and the smell of flowers alone always lifted her spirits. She dreamed that one day she would be able to make others just as happy by giving them beauty. However, on the day of her coming-of-age ceremony, she had to give up her dream. She realized that people don't always get the gifts they dream of. Although she knew she could still follow her dream, ignoring the gift, there was a voice inside her. This voice in her heart kept repeating, "Kill, kill the enemy." She tried to ignore it, but it started to give her head a headache. Rent said her name with concern. Rinka continued, saying that the gift brought her not only pain, but also joy. And she learned this from Rent himself. She admitted that she was afraid to fight her old enemy, but she knew she had to do it. That's why she won't run away anymore. This is her destiny, and she intends to follow it no matter what. Rent confidently supported her. He said that after all, he was her creditor, and would follow her to the ends of the earth until she repaid her debt. Meanwhile, in another place, a man sternly asked what the men wanted from him. Guy said that they wanted him to kill someone. He placed before him an advance payment of 100,000 gold pieces, and added that after the completion of the matter, they would pay 10 million. The man asked who exactly was their target. Misa specified that they needed Rent from a team called Double Divergence. She disparagingly mentioned that he had a dirty piggy bank hanging from his belt and called him a feeble-minded bastard. The man immediately understood who they were talking about. He said that this was the same guy who had defeated 3 B-rank adventurers the other day. The second man clarified who exactly he was fighting. The first one replied that the opponents were the losers from the Boundless Sky Sword Squad. Guy was shocked by this, not hiding his emotions. Misa tried to stop him, but it was too late. The second man just chuckled. He said he knew it. These clients were too famous in a bad way. He added that although they do dirty work, they are not stupid enough to become enemies of Meteor Shower, who stands behind Rent Mountain. Misa angrily called them weaklings and said that they would find someone else. However, the man asked to wait a minute. He said that the payment for canceling the deal should remain with them. Misa asked again in surprise, not believing what she heard. The second man said threateningly that if they refused the deal, he could share the details of their order with the others. He shouted loudly to the entire hall that the Boundless Sky Sword Squad wanted to take revenge with someone else's hands, and they were only offering 100,000 gold for it. The men sitting nearby were shocked when they heard this. They reacted indignantly, emphasizing that taking revenge for a lost duel was the height of pity. They advised to forget about such a stupid idea, because it was already beneath any dignity. The men reminded that these 3 had already sunk to the very bottom. Misa turned around in annoyance and ordered the others to leave. Later, Guy, in a rage, cursed those with whom they had tried to negotiate. He said that not only had they refused to fulfill their request, but they had also taken their money. Elle remembered how, back in the old days, they would have simply beaten up those bastards and taken what was theirs. Misa, gritting her teeth, said that they were not in a position to afford that right now. Elle screamed in despair, as the money was all they had left, adding that they could no longer even afford to rent the room they were living in. Guy, lowering his head, muttered that he would have to earn money in the dungeons again. Misa bitterly reminded them that they had already sold all their weapons and armor, so going there barehanded was pointless. Guy, after a short pause, suggested hunting at least goblins. He looked at the bracelet they had and cautiously suggested that perhaps it was worth selling. Misa flatly refused with a sharp voice. She reminded him that this bracelet allows him to restore up to 3,000 units of magic, which makes it extremely valuable. Guy, sensing that they were reaching a dead end, tried to convince her. He said that what they needed most now was money, not magic. Such a rare artifact could be exchanged for hundreds of potions, and that would give them a chance to survive. They came to the appraiser. He examined the bracelet and said that he could offer 6,000 gold pieces for it. Guy was shocked by this assessment. He shouted that he must be blind if he was offering such a price. The appraiser calmly declared that it was just a cheap bracelet and nothing more. Guy couldn't help but object that such an artifact could replenish 1,000 units of magic, and that already made it unique. The appraiser doubted the veracity of these words and said that it seemed like he was simply making it up. Misa, unable to bear it, called him an idiot and demanded that he return the bracelet. Elle, who had no strength left, muttered tiredly that she was hungry. Meanwhile, the deadline for paying the debt to Rent was inexorably approaching. There were only 8 days left until the last day. Yagyu's shop welcomed visitors again, and Rent, passing by one of the windows, noticed a doll whose gaze seemed truly creepy to him. Meanwhile, Suzu, filled with enthusiasm, called him over to her to show off Rinka's new outfit. She proudly announced that it was ready and invited him to take a look at her sister. Rinka came out in her new clothes and hesitantly asked if they suited her. Rent, confused, nevertheless confirmed that they suited her very well. The outfit was just perfect. Lindau, who was watching their reaction, said with a satisfied smile that her look was interesting and expressive. He noted that the outfit turned out exactly as it was intended. It did not restrict movement in battle and was comfortable. He said that he had chosen a light but durable kimono, the fabric of which contained mithril powder, making the clothes conduct magic perfectly. He also explained that this item was called a hakama, a traditional piece of oriental equipment designed in subdued colors. Although the hakama may look heavy, it is actually cut to allow for easy movement. He asked her if she liked the new outfit. Rinka enthusiastically confirmed that she was satisfied. She then firmly suggested to Rent that they go to the dungeon as soon as possible. They headed into the Great Melba Labyrinth and found themselves on the 3rd floor. Mappy warned that this level could be a bit of a relaxation and asked Rent to help her collect the magic stones. Rent noticed a room that was off to the side and pointed out that that was where the entrance to the 4th floor was. He expressed confidence that their goal was already waiting for them ahead. He suggested moving on. Rinka readily supported him. They moved to the 4th floor, known as the Castle of Sorrows. Rent noticed that they had finally reached the right place and ordered them to move forward. Suddenly, skeletons appeared before them, forming an entire army of the dead. Rent calmly noted that he had prudently acquired new skills for just such occasions. The system activated the first level of enhancement magic. The announcement said that for 1,000 units, the following effects were activated: increased agility, attack power, and defense. Rinka, feeling the flow of power, decided to fight the dead herself. Rent allowed her to take the initiative. With a concentrated expression on her face, Rinka said that from the first blow to the last, her sword would cut down enemies without mercy, as befits a bearer of the Assura Path. Rent, watching the fight, mentally noted how precise and clean she was acting. He, too, wanted to test his new skills. The system reported that first-level wind magic for 1,000 units was activated. He then cast a water flow spell. Instantly, the first-level water magic was also activated, again for 1,000 units. Rent called out to Rinka to check on her condition. Rinka, without stopping, replied that she was fine. Soon, stronger enemies appeared. Rent put his hand on Rinka's shoulder and confidently said that everything would be fine, because he was there. Rinka said that she could have many problems with the enemies that surrounded her. Rent said that he would take everything upon himself and began to provoke. The system has activated a level 1 energy boost of 5,000 units. Rent then cast the Earth Cocoon spell, summoning first-tier Earth magic for 1,000 units. He noted with a slight smile that today it was Rinka who was shining on stage, not him. Meanwhile, Rinka was fighting a 4-armed skeleton. She mentally admitted to herself that she had trained for this day for a very long time. She became stronger than before, and now she felt changes in herself. Rent, watching her actions, noted that she was doing an excellent job. Rinka noticed how the skeleton threw away his shield as if he was angry. The sudden blow sent her flying. Rent screamed her name, but Rinka immediately calmed him down, saying that everything was under control. The kimono she wore protected her. She assured herself that she could handle it. As if repeating a mantra, she said again that from the first to the last blow, her sword would cut without mercy and ordered the enemy to take a step. After all, a warrior of the Assura Path stood before him. At that moment, Rinka remembered her past. Her peers, upon learning of her gift, cried out, asking what kind of gift she had received. They were astonished to hear that it was the path of an Assura, and especially of the SSS rank. It seemed incredible to them. Inside, Rinka mentally begged them to stop, because she didn't want such a gift. Her former squad expressed their incredulity that she actually had such a unique skill. They urged her to pull herself together. Rinka screamed in her mind that she had had enough. She too had the right to difficulties and to hope. Other members of her previous squad once said that they could have become stronger without her. Rinka went back to her memories and thought that it was unfair. They used her as bait and abandoned her. Now she realized that she was not going to tolerate this any longer. She was ready to put an end to it, once and for all. Rent watched the fight, taking it all in. He noted in his mind that the new armor Rinka wore was perfectly reinforced by his casting magic, and her sword complemented that arsenal. All this formed a harmonious and powerful combination, against which the skeleton could do nothing. Rinka, meanwhile, continued the battle, fully focused on the enemy. Before this, Lindo, with a serious expression, wondered what kind of person Rinka was. He reminded her that her gift was the Assura Path, which is an immense desire to destroy, especially in the heat of battle. He wasn't sure if she was aware of this nature herself, but he noted that at such moments she desperately needed external control, otherwise she risked turning into something else. A ruthless monster. He expressed the opinion that her future in this world now depended entirely on Rent. Rent, hearing all this, acknowledged the justice of these words and inwardly agreed with Lindau. In the present, right on the battlefield, Rinka was hoarsely shouting words full of anger. She repeated over and over again for the enemy to die, as if losing herself in rage. Rent arrived just in time and stopped her gently but firmly. He put his hand on her shoulder and told her that the fight was over and there was no need to fight anymore. Rinka, as if waking up, said his name and looked into his eyes with concern. Rent reminded her that not long ago she had saved him, and now he had repaid her that debt. Rinka admitted that everything that happened seemed strange to her. At that moment, she seemed to stop being herself. Rent confidently said that it didn't matter who stood before her as an opponent. He vowed that he would not let her forget who she really was. Mappy suddenly broke the silence with a joyful exclamation. She congratulated Rinka on finally defeating the enemy she called a knuckle. However, she then wondered why there was no joy and satisfaction from the victory on everyone's faces. Rinka, as if she hadn't heard Mappy, quietly said that she felt the same anger that Rent had once felt. Her feelings became confused, and anger engulfed her entire body, subjugating it. Rent responded by recalling how, during a recent duel, he had been filled with the desire not only to take away the debtor's magical powers, but to take away everything they had. Mappy decided it was time to reveal the truth about what SSS Rank Gifts really are. She explained that there was a special meaning behind this rank. Rent listened in surprise as Mappy began to explain that gifts of this rank represented more than just power. These were the so-called stigmas, the stigmas of the 7 deadly sins. They were the ones that symbolized the true nature of these gifts: greed, anger, gluttony, sloth, lust, envy, and pride. And this is what made them SSS rank, not just their power. Rent was surprised to hear about sins as a source of strength. Rinka also had difficulty understanding what all this meant. Mappy went on to explain that each of them was affected by a different sin. In Rent's case, it was greed, the desire to take everything and leave the enemy empty-handed. In Rinka's case, it was anger, a rage that pushed toward destruction. She reminded them that they had both recently come to terms with the true nature of their gifts. Rent exclaimed and blamed Mappy for not telling him about this sooner. Mappy calmly replied that it was much more effective to let them experience it all for themselves than to explain it in words. She asked that next time they not let these sins consume them. She really hoped that they would. Rinka, with her gaze downcast, quietly said that she could not understand why God had endowed them with such dangerous powers. Mappy just shrugged. She honestly admitted that even she, a little fairy, couldn't understand the thoughts of Yggdrasil, the great mind that controlled all of this. Rent thought for a moment, repeating the word Yggdrasil to himself, as if realizing its meaning for the first time. Mappy, seeing how tired everyone was, suggested that they put off all these matters until next time. After fighting such a strong enemy, their minds and bodies were completely exhausted. She suggested that everyone go home. Rent stopped, looked at her, and asked if she was really on their side. Mappy, with a smile and a characteristic chuckle, reminded that she was a fairy of support, and her job was to guide her master. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Guy and his party arrived at the guild building. They were met by a guild employee who, after examining the documents and results, announced that for the work they had done in exterminating the goblins, they would receive a total of 50,000 gold. There were only 5 days left until the due date. The detachment's debt amounted to 2,678,078 units. They had only 86,132 of the required 153,139 units on hand. The missing amount was 38,059 units. Misa said with irritation that they were confident in their preparation. Guy, tired and exhausted, complained that the daily hunt had worn him out to the limit. Misa tried to calculate how much more was needed. 1 bottle replenished 500 units, and if you multiply that by 77, you get 38,500. She noted that each of them needed to drink 5 bottles a day, but even so, it still wasn't enough. Elle, exhausted and depressed, whispered that she couldn't go on like this any longer. Misa reminded her that she used to drink much more, and didn't complain. Elle replied that the situation was different, and Misa simply couldn't understand it. Misa, not wanting to argue, harshly stated that from tomorrow everyone would have to drink 10 bottles a day, and added that no one would provide assistance. Guy, exasperated, ordered Elle to stop being capricious and just do what was needed. Elle desperately refused. Misa screamed her name, but it was too late. Elle turned and ran away. Guy asked where she was going, but received no answer. Misa sighed wearily, realizing that they couldn't give up at this point. Soon they found themselves in the guild. The guild employee politely asked how she could help them. Elle, without thinking, said that she had enough and was leaving the squad. Guy and Misa reacted with shock at the same time. Elle clarified that her debt would be forgiven if she left the squad. Guy cried out, not believing that she had decided to take such a step. Misa also calmly announced that she was leaving too. Guy was shocked to the depths of his soul. The guild employee clarified whether both girls really intended to leave the squad. Misa and Elle confirmed their decision at the same time. The employee explained that in this case, the squad would disintegrate naturally. Both girls agreed to this. Guy tried to object, reminding them that they had reached B rank and such a group couldn't be disbanded just like that. Misa coldly replied that if the group disbanded, their magical debt would probably disappear. Guy whispered that they had been through 5 years together. Meanwhile, Misa and Elle bent over the parchment, studying the terms. Guy, feeling anxious, shouted towards the administrator, begging to cancel the disbandment of the squad. But the guild employee calmly informed that the procedure had already been completed and the squad was officially disbanded. Guy let out a stunned breath. Misa, looking at the papers, realized with despair that the debt was tied to each of them as individuals. It was now impossible to get rid of it. There were 4 days left until the day of repayment. Misa and Elle sat in silence. Misa drank the potion without saying a word. There were 3 days left. Then came the second day before the debt was due. The next day, Guy was walking down the street and accidentally bumped into a man. The man looked at him carefully and remembered that he was a former swordsman from a unit called Sword of Something. The other men, hearing this, remembered that the party had broken up after a quarrel. They added that he seemed to have suffered a complete defeat in a recent duel, and now it was definitely the end for him. Gaius couldn't hold back and, in response to their taunts, threw a bottle of potion at them. He shouted that this was not the end, and that he would definitely be able to get out of this. However, one of the men came closer, hit him, and added that now he would get what he deserved. The men beat Guy right on the street. There is only 1 day left until the due date for paying the debt. Meanwhile, Rent, watching the proceedings, calmly noted that they would likely not be able to repay the debt. Mappy agreed with him. Rinka, slightly worried, said that she was not quite sure what would happen if the three did not manage to pay. She added that death was really what awaited them. Rent said sadly that he did not want to take things to such an extreme measure. Mappy, in turn, added with a smile that if they died, they would definitely not be able to repay the debt, and giggled. Rent turned to Rinka and assured her that she had nothing to worry about. Even if their powers seemed scary, his own gift, the Infinite Magic Vault, was created to help others. He said that by helping Rinka become stronger, he himself develops. He promised that he would never become a greedy man who would drive others to their deaths. Then he paused and admitted that he had probably had too much to drink and now wanted to get some fresh air. Rinka, watching him, thought. In her mind, she noted that from that day on he began to drink more often. She was worried about him. Meanwhile, Rent was thinking about something bigger. He repeated the words about the 7 sins to himself and thought that somewhere in this world, besides them, there were 5 more possessors of SSS Rank Gifts. They may also be facing challenges with their own strengths. And at that moment, as if by script, Misa appeared in front of him. She came up and said hello, reminding him of herself. Rent, turning around, recognized her with surprise. Misa approached Rent and calmly told him not to be so careful around her. She reminded him that she could not harm him in any way. Rent, without showing emotion, asked dryly what she wanted from him. Misa looked down and apologized. She apologized for everything she had done before, for calling him a weakling, humiliating him in front of everyone, and ultimately kicking him out of the squad. Rent, hearing her words, clarified that Guy and Elle were no longer with her. He realized that Misa had come alone, and immediately guessed that she was trying to save only herself. He noted that nothing had changed in her at all. Her behavior remained the same as before. He said it was too late to ask for forgiveness. He didn't need an apology. All he wanted was for the debt to be repaid. Misa did not pay up soon. She would face serious consequences. Misa grabbed his hand in desperation and begged him to wait. Rent angrily demanded that she let him go. Misa suddenly kissed him. Rent instantly pushed her away and abruptly stopped what was happening. Misa, without losing confidence, began to remember the past. She recalled that trip when they rode together in a carriage from the village. Then she was unable to respond to his feelings, and she still regretted it. She admitted that she did not find the courage in herself, and that she regretted it. Misa said she still loved him, and so she begged him to give her another chance. She offered to start over, to go on a new adventure together. Misa asked if he was ready to be with her again. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Rinka began to worry. She noticed that Rent had not returned for a long time. Mappy joked that he might have had too much to drink again and fallen down somewhere. Rinka said anxiously that she needed to go look for him. She went out into the streets and started calling for Rent. Soon she saw him standing with Misa. Rinka, feeling threatened, called out to them and demanded that Misa immediately move away from Rent. Misa silently activated the spell and used magical bonds to capture Rinku. Rent, shocked, shouted her name and asked in surprise where Misa got her magic from. Misa explained that it was the magic wands that contained the spell charge themselves. She admitted that she had no idea that such useful artifacts were being sold. True, they were disposable. Misa demanded that Rent not move. If he did not remove the mark right now, she would destroy Rinka with her strongest spell. She expressed her confidence that she would not be able to withstand such an attack. She added with contempt that she didn't understand why anyone could like Rinka at all. She wondered why they even accepted him into the squad. According to her, Rent was no good for anything. Rent calmly replied that the stricter a person behaves, the more others begin to hate him. But if you act with dignity and integrity, even the most difficult conditions can harden your character, as they did with him. He added that he does not want something like this to happen again. Misa, angry, reminded him that she had asked him not to move. Rinka challenged her to do what she wanted. She doubted whether Misa had enough determination. Misa, irritated, activated the Fire Tornado spell to carry out the threat. Rent said at that moment that the day had changed, and now it was all over. The magic disappeared, the spell was cancelled. Misa asked in complete confusion what had happened. She did not understand where her magic had gone. Rent suggested that she check her status. Misa opened the screen and saw that all her skills were gone. Rent began to list Fire Magic, 1,110, Magical Perception, 550, Magical Operation, also 550. He explained that he had turned all of her skills into pure magical power. But even that wasn't enough, so he was forced to use her gift as well. Misa, dumbfounded, exhaled that this couldn't be. Rent had no hesitation in declaring that there would be no mercy for debtors, and in 10 days he expected the same payment from her. Misa screamed after him, asking what she should do now. Mappy appeared. She, watching what was happening, sighed and said that it was a pity. Misa really had to go through a hard time. Misa, shocked, asked who was there. Mappy appeared in front of Misa and politely introduced herself, saying that she was glad to meet her. Misa, stunned by the sudden appearance of the fairy, screamed in fear. Mappy, chuckling slightly, suggested that the girl must be hallucinating and joked that she might have drunk too many potions. She suggested starting over. Mappy thanked Misa for her actions making Ren's awakening possible, and expressed her gratitude for never returning his magic power to him. The fairy said that she wanted to pay back for all the evil that Misa and her companions had done to Rent, but added that there was another way to awaken the gift, a way in which a certain amount of magic must be returned to the owner. If Misa and the others had returned all the magic from the start, Rent would have awakened long ago. Misa, not believing what she heard, asked again about the return. Mappy confirmed that this is how it works. If they really took Rent seriously, their squad would have reached a rank long ago. However, in reality, things turned out differently. Mappy, with cold frankness, stated that it was because they were all worthless, selfish scum. Misa, beside herself with rage, grabbed Mappy and threw her to the ground. Then she angrily stepped on her foot and called her offensive names. There was anger and resentment in her voice. She blamed Rent himself for everything that happened, saying that he was an even bigger scoundrel and that all the blame lay with him. Mappy calmly replied that if Misa wanted to let off steam, she did it. but there was no way to get it back, and she wouldn't be able to avoid hellish payments. Misa, barely comprehending what was happening, recoiled. Later, passers-by gathered on the streets of the city. They saw Misa lying down and began to discuss the situation. Lindo came up and asked what was going on. The residents watching the girl said with concern that she was still breathing, but her condition was critical. One of them reported that she probably had potion poisoning. He demanded that someone call a doctor immediately. Another villager recognized her as a mage from the Boundless Sky Sword group. Lindo was surprised to hear the familiar name. The man explained that this group was formerly called Sky Cutting Sword, and it was rumored that they were the fastest-growing B-rank unit in history. Lindau commented ironically that their name was indeed strange. He wondered who could resist the sky itself. He looked up, noting how clear the sky was today. Meanwhile, Rinka approached Rent and apologized for the wait. She suggested heading to the 5th level of the dungeon. Rent, after some thought, suggested starting with something else. He said that perhaps it was time for them to take on guild quests. Rent expressed a desire for their party to gain a name and reputation, and this could lead to a meeting with the owners of other gifts, embodying the remaining mortal sins. Mappy, hearing this, curiously asked what they were going to do if they actually met such people. Rent calmly and firmly replied that he wanted to save them, free them from the curse of their gifts. He said that perhaps this was his mission, since he had such power. Mappy added with affection and a little mockery that she had been talking about this for a long time. Rent, she said, was good-natured and naive, almost like a fool. Rent frowned and asked if she had just called him a name. Mappy, still cheerful, said it was just a kind of compliment. Rinka, looking ahead, noted that even if they ever met other SSS gift holders, they would most likely have to fight. Mappy confirmed seriously that this would most likely be the case. Rent also admitted that Rinka was right. Rinka promised that in that case she would protect Rent, as always. Rent looked at her and asked again if they had really made that decision. Rinka confirmed it with confidence. Rent then enthusiastically exclaimed that he would start looking for suitable applications in the guild right away. In another place, far away from them, a girl, moving with difficulty, took one uncertain step. Her gaze fell on a piece of paper stuck to the bulletin board. It read, "Magic." The text read, "Nearby and useful resources for anyone who wishes to obtain magical power." It stated that 5,000 magic units were offered per person. The request came from a village named Uimaru, and the sender was looking for a place to live and work. The girl, not believing her eyes, tore off the leaflet. She thought that perhaps she could obtain magical powers. And for the first time in a long time, she felt that her dream could still become a reality.